Chapter 12:23. Swoosh. There was another sound of a car door opening. It was Wolf. After everyone was picked up, Hunter could finally relax. Magician asked, "Boss, what are we going to do next?" "Show our faces at the market." "There's no need." Chin Mo glanced up, his voice calm. "When I was talking to old Q just now, I had an unexpected gain." "Unexpected gain?" Prince was confused. "What gain? Why didn't he know?" Chin Mo glanced at Fatty's laptop, multitasking. "The customers in the pavilion weren't just the two of us, there was another person." "There was another person. Why didn't he see him?" Chin Mo tapped on one of the messages. "He would appear there at this time, but he didn't even come out. It must be him." "Scorpion, all of Kwang's activities in the outside world are carried out by him, selling goods and purchasing guns. We were sitting in the pavilion for a long time but he didn't appear. He should be observing us, Fatty." "Yes. What's the situation on your side?" Fatty removed his earpiece, a mischievous smile on his face. "As expected, boss, the other party investigated you and Prince. All the traffic on my website came from him." "What do you mean?" Prince widened his eyes. "They investigated me and boss. But on second thought, it was true that they would investigate." Prince hadn't expected their disguise to be so meticulous, but the other party hadn't let down their guard. Was this the difference between a country and a foreign country? If it hadn't been for his boss, one sentence would have been enough to make the other party raise their guns and keep them there. It seemed like he had to be more careful in his next actions. Fatty tapped on the keyboard and turned to Prince. "It's easy to deal with this place, but Kwang's side isn't easy. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to see anything wrong with my website, but Kwang has a hacker under him. He might be able to see through it. Hence, we have to contact Scorpion as soon as possible and use him to break through the organization. Wait for him to contact us." In the end, Chin Mo was the one who decided the direction. "Next, you just have to act your part as a rich second generation." Chin Mo closed his eyes after he finished speaking. Only then did they remember that ever since the troops had left, their boss hadn't rested for even a minute. To be able to deal with such a situation without any rest, he had dispelled their suspicions. He had to admit that the boss was really strong. On this day, everyone was talking about how rich the Crown Prince and his gang were. Many people want to do business with them. However, he was blocked by the other party's investment advisor. He said that they wanted to take a look and compare the goods. This was the bad thing about Chinese people. They were very cunning when doing business. At first, they thought that he was a rich fool. They didn't expect him to be so hard to deal with. However, it was precisely because of this that he was even more certain of the other party's wealth, and he was even more eager to cooperate with him. Other than Kwang, there were other poppy businesses here. The news was that both parties were in the midst of a discussion. After hearing the news, Scorpion couldn't sit still. He told Kwang everything that had happened here one after another. "Let's wait a little longer." This was Kwang's original words. He was wearing a white coat, standing in the middle of the crowd. "Investigate the background of this group of people, we can only be at ease when doing business." Scorpion replied, "I've already sent someone to investigate, their background isn't bad, they are the most suitable to be our seller. I even got someone to check their assets, they are very rich." "I'm referring to other aspects," Kwang said as he turned. "Their identities." Scorpion paused. "I'll take a closer look." "I'll leave them to you, don't cause any trouble," Kwang said, his gaze landing outside the window. Scorpion instantly understood. "Wang, you went to school?" Kwang didn't reply because someone had come over. "Doctor, he sprained his ankle while running, can you check if it's serious?" Kwang chuckled, hanging up the phone. He bent down, pressing his fingers on the person's leg like a professional school doctor, a warm smile on his face. Fortunately, the bone isn't injured. I'll spray some medicine on him later. Remember to apply a hot compress and don't exercise for the time being. All right, the male student replied. F***ck, I told you it was fine, why did you have to scare yourself? Koang listened, tilting his head, holding a fountain pen as he wrote down the list. Everything in the school seemed beautiful, even the wind was warmer than outside. Very quickly, the gentle atmosphere was interrupted by the sound of a car braking. It was a pure black Lamborghini, stopping at the school gates. With a turn of the steering wheel, it disappeared from the guard's line of sight. The guard, who had just stood up, frowned. What was the meaning of this? He had assumed the other party was coming in. In reality, the car hadn't gone far. Bojo sat in the driver's seat, her Bluetooth headset blinking. This is the school. Hoshino's voice came through. Your location isn't wrong, I've already settled the admission procedures for you. This school isn't bad locally, it's normal for students to transfer in or temporarily stay here for a month before transferring out. It won't raise any suspicions, but I've done my research, this school is very normal. Other than a few comments on the internet, there aren't any obvious cases of bullying and there aren't any news of students wanting to commit suicide. All the information of the teachers is with me, it's a very normal recruitment process. Why did you set your eyes on this school? Bojo stopped the car, pressing her neck and turning it twice. It was a suave action. When she glanced up, her eyes were filled with darkness. I want to uncover part of the criminal records from back then. Some of the students were rescued and spent 2 years in the psychological rehabilitation center. During those 2 years, they were resting. How big of a coincidence do you think it would be for 4 of them to choose this school to continue their studies? It's such an ordinary school, the enrollment rate isn't high and the environment isn't ordinary either. It's hard to believe that it's so attractive. Hoshino typed a word before pausing, shifting the person who had interrupted his call. His faint smile paired with his pure-colored sweater made him seem as though he was living in a manga. From what you said, the other party seems a little difficult to deal with. Do you want me to fly over? It's fine. Bojo smiled. Just support me from the back. Hoshino glanced outside the floor-to-ceiling window. I'll wait for you here, there's still a week left. What? Bojo's thoughts were completely focused on the school. Hoshino carried the cat and placed it on his shoulder. He had always been gentle when facing Bojo. There's still a week before the Asian Cup. The people from Supreme Alliance are all waiting for you. Hey, Vice Captain over there, are you strengthening our enemy camp? Shin couldn't stand the fact that someone was ignoring him. He raised his voice with a lazy and mocking tone. Bojo heard him and arched a brow. Why is it him again? Hoshino smiled but didn't say anything. Bojo pouted. Why didn't you throw this young master out? I can't throw him. Hoshino walked to the side of the table, probably to get the cat to leave. Unfortunately, there were times when a certain cat wasn't cooperative. It was obvious that it followed its owner very well. Shin was very smart. He held on to the table and laughed. Are you bad-mouthing me? Bojo heard this sentence. She was frank, a devilish smile on her face. It seems like a certain gang is about to close down. If not, how could they tolerate the head of a family freeloading outside? I didn't like you in the past, but now. Shin paused. The sharpness in his eyes explained everything. Hoshino roughly understood that some people were born with incompatible auras, for example, these two. But very quickly, the other party hung up. When he turned back, the ruthless 10th sect, which was feared by the underworld, had a cold expression on his face. It was obvious that he had lost the argument. With a wave of his hand, his phone was destroyed. Hoshino sat there with a cup of coffee in his hand. He didn't care about the other party's actions. After all, he had already sent the message. If it was possible, he wanted to fly over. After all, there were too many uncertainties in the operation in the school. If he couldn't find anything, he would be even more worried. Of course, Bojio wouldn't come to this school without any preparations. No one could find the operation team. Young Master Tang could only provide her with such information. After discovering this phenomenon, the military had sent people to investigate in secret. Based on the information Bojio received, there were 3 teachers who came from the military. But strangely, no matter who came, they couldn't find anything strange. Ever since she found out about the mission Chin Imo had taken in the past, Bojio swore that she wouldn't let him fall into such a situation again. Since she was going to save him, she had to make things simpler. Little Blackie, find a place and wait for me. Don't forget to lock the door automatically. Bojio reached out, lifted the black bag, and slammed it onto her shoulder. She pushed the car door open and walked towards the middle school that wasn't far away. This time, she didn't have silver hair. Instead, she had dyed her hair black. She looked like a clean little brother that people often saw in school. The school uniform here was different from the one in Jiang City. It was a very Chinese sportswear. But even so, the clothes didn't fall down on Bojio. Instead, it made her look more refreshed. Bojio's blue jacket was half open and she wore a white t-shirt inside. Bojio appeared in front of the security guard. The security guard didn't stop her. He assumed it was a student who was late after the lunch break. But when did such a handsome boy appear in their school? The security guard was still questioning her when Bojio walked towards the teacher's office. She had always trusted Hoshino's efficiency. It was a perfect identity. When the teacher from the teacher's office saw Bojio, she glanced at the information on the computer. Then she lifted her head to look at the student. With this face, it was no wonder he had delayed his studies because of a girl. Even if you only stay here for a month, I hope you can integrate into our class. This year is very important to you. Also, our school forbids students from dating at such a young age. I want to make this clear to you first. I hope you won't make this mistake. Bojio smiled. I'll listen to you. The teacher nodded. She closed the information in her hands. I'll bring you to the classroom. The students in the class were very curious about the new student. After all, it meant that they had a new toy. However, when some of them saw the young man standing on the stage, they put away their thoughts and exchanged glances with each other. She reached under the table and pressed her phone. Did you see him? He's so handsome. He has canine teeth when he smiles. It seems like he has a good family background. We got lucky. Should we cancel the prank game? We must cancel it. Pull him in and let him play with us. That's a good idea. The few girls smiled at each other. When they lifted their heads, the youngster had finished introducing herself. The young man had already finished his self-introduction with a smile on his face. There are 2 empty seats. Which one do you want to sit on? The teacher asked. Bojio glanced up. Her gaze landed at the back. It was a place that every classroom had, the place where the broom and dustpan were. Similarly, many people weren't willing to sit there. Under normal circumstances, it would be empty. But in this classroom, it wasn't. Bojio retracted her gaze. She grabbed her bag and walked over. There was a person sitting there. His shoulders were hunched and his figure was slightly out of shape. But that wasn't the reason why Bojio stopped. It was because of the injury on her face. Even though it was covered by her hair, the injury was still visible. It wasn't obvious and others might not have noticed it. But Bojo was too familiar with it. She placed her bag down with a thud. Even the teacher from the teaching department frowned, but she didn't say anything. On the other hand, the girls narrowed their eyes. Why is he sitting there? He doesn't know the rules here. He will understand in a few days. That poor B** starred is really lucky. Wait and see. It was a chat group. Many people in the class were in it. Whoever wasn't in it meant one thing. That person had been kicked out by them. In essence, being kicked out meant abandonment. Those who didn't know anything and liked to lie were poor. They weren't fit to be with them. This was probably the easiest psychological cue to trigger at this age. Most of the time, the formation of such psychological cues was due to the environment. It was a simple matter. If the environment was different, the growth of the child wouldn't be different. In a class, if there were more than 10 students who liked to compare and use money to settle things, the atmosphere would change. Especially for girls. Gradually, the atmosphere would change. The change would be silent. Unknowingly, everyone's topic would change to, "Your shoes are so beautiful. Which brand is it? I want to buy a pair too." Or, "My dad gave me 1,000 today. I'll send red packets in the group or treat everyone to a meal. The phone is so hard to use. I'll change to the iPhone 7. Perhaps a long time ago, everyone was not like this. As for when exactly it started to change, even they themselves did not know. There was nothing wrong with spending money. There's nothing wrong with having too much money to burn. The problem was that the money parents earned in 3 days might only be enough for their children to treat their classmates to a birthday party. Every parent didn't want their children to look more pitiful than others in school. Hence, they would try their best to give them the best. But most of the time, the monster in the heart was nurtured. We gave them material things, but we didn't teach them how to control it. In school, the methods used to ostracize someone were even more unbearable than in society. The entire class was discussing a topic. No matter what you said, they wouldn't allow anyone to interrupt. Regardless of whether they were pretty or not, the girls who liked to huddle would sit together during breaks or go to the washroom together. Bojo chose to sit at the back not only because she saw some problems but also because she could see the entire situation in the classroom. In just a minute's time, she could already tell who was in control of the class. That's right, it was control. Anyone who was observant would be able to see that the entire class revolved around the 5 girls. They loved to set the pace. The more they did so, the more attention would be focused on them. It was obvious that they enjoyed the attention. At the same time, Bojo could tell that there was something hidden in their eyes when they glanced over. Perhaps this was the difference between pretending to be a teacher and a student. When you are a teacher, you will never know what kind of undercurrents are surging in the classroom. Perhaps the plump girl had already felt it, which was why her expression changed. Bojo twirled the pen, her voice low. "Someone bullied you." The girl turned her head and looked over, her eyes red. She hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything. Instead, she pulled the wooden chair out. Even her back was slightly hunched as she walked out. As soon as she went out, the other girls followed her out. Bojo placed the carbon pen down. Before she could put on her jacket, she had already disappeared from her seat. Bang! One of the girls reached out and pulled her into the washroom. She looked down. "What's wrong with you? Did you get to know a new classmate?" The man shivered as if he was very afraid and shook his head. "Softer, you'll attract the teacher's attention." Another girl lowered her voice. "But the transfer student today is really handsome. Why would he come to our school? What's so strange about that? Most importantly, this person should stay away from the handsome guy, understand?" Unexpectedly, at this moment, the girl who was pushed spoke. "There's something wrong with him. Who's wrong? Are you suffering from persecutory delusions again? The girl pressed her face down. It's true. Believe me, there's something wrong with that transfer student. He even asked me if someone bullied me. Someone like him won't be able to blend into our class. The girl wanted to get out of her current situation. If someone else had appeared, she wouldn't have to suffer such treatment. From the looks of it, the transfer student was her best chance. The girls glanced at each other. Is he another infiltrator? That's not possible. Wong told us to be careful of the teachers, but the students? Do you think someone would disguise as a student? Besides, he looks to be the same age as us. But how are we going to explain what he heard? He's like this every day. He just wants people to know that he's being bullied. It's normal for a transfer student to ask about it. One of the girls laughed. You guys don't understand her tricks, but I do. I was fooled by her previously. She said that her family is rich and so on and so forth. She even called others to ostracize me. Luckily, she was exposed in the end. Her family is just an ordinary worker and she still dares to pretend in front of me. How can she be more noble than me? Tell me. Peng, another sound rang out. Don't think about finding someone to replace you. That's right. In the past, I thought she was rich and used that to order us to do this and that. Now, you have nothing to say. I'm warning you, don't think too much. If you don't know your place, I'll push you into the toilet. As the fat girl quieted down, the conversation gradually disappeared. Less than a minute had passed. The girls walked out, chatting and laughing. They didn't expect to see the transfer student after coming out. He was still as handsome as ever. When he raised his eyebrows, there was even a hint of evil in it. They blushed. Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket and glanced over. She wasn't looking at the girls but the person at the back. So that was it. The people in this school. None of them were as innocent as the outside world. Hence, no matter who came, they wouldn't be able to find anything. It wasn't that there weren't people who had been bullied. Instead, the people who had been bullied had bullied others before. The more they were in this state, the darker their hearts were. They had already become one with these people long ago. There was no saving them. Bojo retracted her gaze. Her thin lips curved upwards, carrying a hint of indifference. This was probably the biggest difference between her and the Almighty. The environment was definitely a factor that affected people. But Bojo always believed in one thing. The good and evil in human nature were determined from the start. In her heart, some people weren't worth saving. Just now, she had been too anxious and wanted to find a breakthrough point. Next. She couldn't reveal anything else. That Wong was the person she was looking for. She looked around. These people weren't the Kwang who could give people hypnosis. Although Hoshino hadn't found any information. But Bojo was an internet user. Basically, everyone knew that the more attention a person wanted on the internet, the more ordinary they were in reality. Moreover, the Wong they were talking about wouldn't be Kwang. The so-called Wong was just chosen by Kwang. Chapter 1224. Bojo took a step forward naturally. She stuffed her hands into her pockets. Excuse me. Her words were directed at the few girls. The colder she was, the more attractive she was. Moreover, Bojo didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Her back view was slightly arrogant. He's really handsome. Someone couldn't help but speak up. She turned towards the fat girl. What did you say just now? Is there something wrong with him caring about you? He didn't even look at you, all right? Don't bother about him. Go and ask if anyone knows where he transferred from and if he has a girlfriend. At this age, it seemed like everything else would be thrown to the back of her mind. She would only have fantasies about handsome young men. Everyone had a young heart, even these girls. Very quickly, Bojio became the target of many people's curiosity. She was so popular that when she didn't have a textbook, the people in front of her would turn to ask her if she could borrow a textbook. As for her desk mate, the fat girl from before, her textbook seemed to have been hidden by someone. During the lesson, she was called out by the teacher. "Sun Jianing, where's your textbook?" The fat girl lowered her head. Her voice was soft. "I forgot that I have a lesson today." The teacher frowned. This wasn't the first time that the other party didn't have a textbook in class. The teacher was very responsible. He walked towards her. "Sun Jianing, tell the truth. Did someone purposely take your textbook away?" The teachers weren't stupid. They were aware of certain things. Bojio sat at the side. She supported her chin. The moment the teacher spoke, the atmosphere in the classroom seemed to freeze, and all sound stopped abruptly. One had to know that some teachers wouldn't bring these issues up to the table to talk about. But this time, the teacher made it clear. The few girls in front turned. Their gazes landed on Sun Jianing. The darkness in their eyes made her lower her head. She continued, "No, teacher, I really forgot that I have a lesson today." After the teacher heard this answer, he didn't know what to say. He sighed and asked the student in front of him to give him a book. There were some things that he couldn't do in every aspect. It was one thing for a student to have a problem, but he couldn't possibly find the problem himself. Moreover, the people in the office also told him not to get involved in this kind of thing. They couldn't do anything about it. This was proven by Sun Jianing. This girl had a bad temper in front of her parents. Once she came to school, her whole person changed. She never said anything about what happened. If she didn't point out someone, the teacher wouldn't be able to intervene in the students' private affairs. The simplest reason was that they couldn't control who was playing with whom. Seeing Sun Jianing sit down obediently, the girls over there laughed, and the classroom returned to its original state. The original textbook was hung outside the window. Almost all the students in the class knew about it, but they acted as if they didn't see it. In this classroom, there seemed to be a tacit understanding. As long as it was related to Sun Jianing, they would not care. Some people did it because they didn't want to interfere, while others knew very well that once they interfered, they would also end up in the same situation. Perhaps they would be the ones being ostracized. There was nothing wrong with people choosing to protect themselves. However, the self-protection in this classroom seemed to have changed. Because they were happy to have such a punching bag. Sometimes, a person's words could lie, but those micro-expressions would never lie. They were happy with the current situation. Some of them even gloated when Lu Jianing stood up. Hence, the problem wasn't with the girls. Instead, the entire classroom had become like this. That was the biggest abnormality. The atmosphere was something that was created by people. Bojio felt that there was an invisible pair of hands moving these people. It didn't need to use much strength, it just needed to amplify a little. Who could it be? Bojio seemed nonchalant, but her eyes were constantly sizing up every student in the classroom. Those few girls were the first to be excluded. As for the others, Bojio's gaze swept past them. Suddenly, her gaze stopped on another empty seat. There was still someone who wasn't here. Bojio's fingers tapped on the table subconsciously. This was usually an action she would do when she was thinking. She had a feeling. The few people who had been hypnotized had all transferred here. However, every single one of them was like an ordinary student. They hadn't been in the limelight and hadn't been ostracized. Yet, they just sat there. When he heard about this, the corners of his mouth were clearly rising. They were enjoying it. If King wasn't alone. Instead, he was a small group. Bojo's fingers suddenly paused. Once again, she turned to look at those few people. Even if the military came to investigate, due to their age, there wasn't any obvious violation of the rules. In fact, it could even be considered as a dutiful job. In that case, the information they found would always be superficial. It was simple, one person wouldn't be able to achieve anything. Anything that could achieve anything would always be handled by 4 to 5 people. There must be something she hadn't come into contact with. What exactly was it? Why? Bojo was still deep in thought when a voice asked, "Why?" It was Sun Jianing. Her eyes were dark as she glanced at Bojo. "Didn't you ask if I was bullied? Why are you acting as though you didn't see anything today? Is it fun to pretend to be concerned?" If one listened carefully, there was hatred in her tone. Perhaps, there was a type of person who didn't feel anything when she was bullied. But if you tried to help her, she would think that you were pretending. There were even times when she forgot how she behaved. Selfish and greedy. Bojo leaned back, her voice calm. "It's fun." "What?" Sun Jianing's eyes lit up. The people sitting in front heard their conversation. The few girls glanced at each other, completely at ease. How could such a person be a police spy? According to King, someone had written a letter saying that there was a bullying incident in their school. Hence, the police would be conducting a secret investigation. They were told not to be too obvious and that there would be a good thing in the next few days. As long as they performed well, they would be qualified to participate. Chapter 12:25. The more she wanted to accomplish something, the more time she felt was tight. But Bojo's face didn't seem like she was in a hurry, especially when she held her bag with one hand and stood up from her seat. Her nose was tilted to the side, and her tall and straight nose was slightly cold, drawing attention to her appearance. "Hi." Someone walked over. Bojo recognized her, it was the leader of the group. "Do you want to join our group?" "Group?" Bojo paused, her bag still on her shoulder. She arched a brow slowly. "What group?" "A group in class where we discuss things and play games without the teacher." Bojo's eyes darkened, turning a beautiful black. "It sounds interesting." "It has to be, how about it? Do you want to join?" The girl tilted her head. Bojo took her phone out naturally. The girl glanced at it. "Wow, the latest model. I've always wanted to buy it but there isn't any here." "Where did you get it from?" "Overseas." Bojo had memorized all the information at the last minute. Since she was going to disguise herself, she had to clean up her background. When the girl heard the word overseas, she turned and exchanged glances with her friends. She was even more certain that they had made the right choice. "Ah, you can scan here." The girl opened the QR code. Bojo's attitude seemed casual, but that was the reason it seemed real. After the message was sent, a group of people lined up to welcome her. The atmosphere wasn't a problem. But very quickly, Bojo realized the crux of the matter. There were 48 people in the class, including her. Almost everyone in the class was in the group, except for 2 people who weren't here. One was Lu Jianing. The other should be the one who wasn't here. That was one of the points. The other point made Bojo's fingers pause for a moment. Then she said calmly, "I thought you would be the admin of the group." "Me?" The girl laughed. "The class monitor should be the one to create the group." "Class monitor?" He was one of the 5 people in the group. Bojo didn't look at anyone else. The longer she stayed here, the more she felt that this classroom was different from other classrooms. The real ostracization wouldn't be shown. It was the subtlety that made one's heart sink. She was no longer facing a group of ordinary middle school students. In fact, these people were already secretly observing her just now. There was one thing that was true. The more they showed off their abilities, the less they would hurt you. The most dangerous ones were those who looked the most ordinary and even pitiful, but could still bite you in the back. Lu Jianing was an example. It was the same for the class monitor. It was very simple. Apart from these few girls, the rest of the people who often talked in the group were those few. The difference was that these girls were just lively, but the real topic of conversation was someone else. This was probably the skill of speaking. Being lively wasn't scary. What was important was bringing up the topic. However, there was one thing that bothered Bojo. Why was there someone missing class? What do you think? The class group is very interesting, isn't it? The girl asked with a smile. Bojo kept her phone and replied simply, not bad. Since there was such a group in every class, it was impossible for the people from the army to not know about it. Why wasn't there any feedback from the information? This could only mean one thing: the group was just a gathering of people to collectively ostracize others. The real order, or rather, the person who constantly formed the psychological suggestion, wouldn't be here. There was another point that was within Bojo's consideration. She wasn't the only one who would place her gaze on these few girls and the 5 transfer students. The people from the army would probably have the same reaction. Under such a strict investigation, how did they manage to contact Kawang? Unless... Bojo clenched her fists, as though she suddenly understood all the information. No, that wasn't right. Her train of thought was wrong from the start. It wasn't just her, even the people from the army had fallen into Kawang's trap. Regardless of whether it was these girls who liked to bully others or the transfer students who had been arranged beforehand, it was just to divert the attention of others. Even if someone came to investigate, the target would be focused on this and ignore everything else. At this moment, Bojo was reminded of what the Almighty had told her. The true nature of psychological guidance was similar to magic. Because there was no difference in the way it was operated and the effects were the same. The more powerful the magician, the more attention he could divert. When you paid too much attention to one thing, it would be easy to neglect other things. Bojo's eyes lit up. She should know who exactly King was. Kawang was a criminal psychologist. In the Almighty's words, he was probably a multi-level marketing brainwasher. Such a person would find stupid people to do the low-level work. But he wouldn't let stupid people do the work for him. Hence, this king had to be smarter than anyone else and had a clearer vision than anyone else. The student who hadn't come. Bojo carried her bag. When there was no one behind her, she found a staircase and stopped. Then she moved and hid inside. When she unzipped the bag, the contents were revealed. They were all electronic devices. Laptops, chargers, and small listening devices. No one had noticed that while they had been chatting with Bojo, the listening devices had been spread out and placed on their bags. Bojo didn't seem to care if the floor was dirty. She leaned against the wall and opened the small laptop. Without a second word, she used the school network to enter from the inside. She avoided the firewall and used the virtual IP address to tamper with the program, locking onto the student's file. In less than a minute, a photo appeared on the laptop screen. It was a boy. He had decent looks and even seemed gentle. Perhaps it was because of his gentleness. His face looked a little sickly. From the information, he seemed to come from a wealthy family. But the reason for the long leave was very vague. Bojo glanced at the description. Poor health. What else? Bojo was just about to pull the preview down when the screen stopped. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps could be heard from the other side. Bojo's fingers paused. The figure was getting closer and closer. When it was right in front of her, the white coat fluttered with the wind, carrying a faint smell of formalin. Chapter 12:26. Bo-Gyo stilled. The man bent down, a smile on his face. "Why are you hiding in such a place?" Bo-Gyo tilted her head. She seemed to be trying to cover the screen. The man lowered his gaze, a dangerous glint flashing past his eyes. When his gaze landed on the screen, the dangerous glint disappeared. "Seems like you are an internet addict." Bo-Gyo was like a student who had been caught playing secretly by her teacher. When she stood up, her laptop was placed at the side. Her earphones fell from her movements and the game's sound was blasted from the computer. At this moment, Bo-Gyo finally saw the man's attire. He was wearing a sweater underneath his white coat. He looked refined, and coupled with his gold-rimmed glasses, it was easy to let one's guard down. The man watched as the youngster sized him up. He smiled. "Don't worry, I'm just a school doctor. I'm not like your teacher who would care about your gaming. But there's a form you have to fill in. Every student has to submit a medical report. Since you transferred here at this time, you have to have one too. Let's go, follow me to the infirmary." Bo-Gyo wasn't completely cooperative. "Teacher, school has ended. I have time to fill it up after school." The school doctor walked forward. Bo-Gyo's thin lips twitched. She reached out to grab her backpack and threw it behind her back. At this moment, she was like a hedonistic son of a rich family. There was even a hint of mischievousness in her. Bo-Gyo did this because it wasn't easy to find her in this place. In a school like this, she had to be on her toes at all times. Even Bo-Gyo didn't know why. Even though the weather was bright and sunny, whenever she was in the school, she would feel that the atmosphere wasn't right. The atmosphere wasn't something that could be seen at a glance. It was a subtle change in the details. Or perhaps, Liu Jianning's incident had given her a wake-up call. At the same time, Bo-Gyo felt a certain amount of pressure. Hence, Bo-Gyo didn't let her guard down against anyone. When she lowered her lids, her fingers moved. Her left hand, which was in her pocket, was holding onto a USB stick. Other than the USB stick, there was also the mini listening device. In reality, the first thing Bo-Gyo noticed wasn't the sound of footsteps. Instead, he smelled something in the air. She seemed to have smelled it somewhere before, but she couldn't remember where she had smelled it from. If it hadn't been Bo-Gyo, someone else wouldn't have been able to clean up all traces in such a short period of time. Moreover, they would still be able to look as though nothing had happened. At this hour, there weren't many people in the infirmary. Only a few students who lived on campus were getting their medicine. "Take a seat." As the school doctor spoke, he took out a pen from the pocket of his white coat. "This is the information. Fill it up first and do a basic physical examination later." Physical examination. Bo-Gyo paused. With her current situation, if she went for a medical examination, everything would be exposed. She couldn't do the physical examination. Bo-Gyo placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. "Sir, you didn't mention anything about a medical examination. I don't want to do it. Besides, I don't have any medical history, it's all written in my file." The school doctor pushed his spectacles, his gaze deepening. Then he smiled. "You can skip the physical examination, but you have to fill up the rest of the information. I'm in charge of the psychological counseling for all the students. Other than knowing your physical condition, I have to know your current condition. This is a requirement of the school. If you don't fill it up, I'll call your parents over tomorrow for a chat." That's really strict. Bo-Gyo was unwilling. The school doctor's lips lifted. From his perspective, there was a problem with the transfer at this time. If there was really a problem, he would definitely get rid of her. But from the looks of it, there was still a need to observe. At least, she looked like a young master who didn't like school. Why did you transfer at this time? It's almost the end of the year exams, aren't you afraid of affecting your studies? He asked casually. Bojo replied lazily, my family arranged it for me. They probably think that I'm far away from the school and would settle any mistakes I make, heh. The school doctor pushed his spectacles up the bridge of his nose. After that, he didn't have any more questions. For a moment, there was only the sound of scribbling in the infirmary. That sound made Bojo feel sleepy. Until her phone vibrated in her pocket. Bojo shook that feeling off. She swiped her fingers across the screen and glanced up. Sir, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. I have an appointment with a classmate. You've just arrived and you're already acquainted with a new classmate. It seems like there won't be any problems. The school doctor placed his pen down. Bojo asked casually, what problems will there be? That will depend on the students themselves. Some might encounter difficulties when they try to blend in. The school doctor smiled. Then, he stopped. Bojo was still thinking about the person who hadn't come to school. She didn't notice anything strange about the school doctor. But she understood one thing. She shouldn't ask any random questions here. Even though she was interested in the difficulties the school doctor had mentioned, Bojo didn't allow herself to show it. Instead, she seemed to be in a rush, carrying the impatience of a youngster. The school doctor sealed all the documents. It's fine if you're just classmates, but the school doesn't allow for a relationship. With that, the school doctor waved his hand, indicating that she could leave. Bojo was about to lift her bag when the person on the other end spoke again. Oh right, you aren't allowed to bring your laptop either. Leave the laptop in your bag with me for now, I'll pass it to your form teacher. Bojo turned towards the direction of the voice. The school doctor's hand was already on her bag. Even the laptop. The school doctor bent his fingers, tapping the school rules on the table. There was indeed a rule that forbade anyone from bringing any electronic products into school. It specifically mentioned laptops and phones. As a student. On the surface, she was a student. Bojo was clear that some rules had to be followed. Besides, with the time difference, she wasn't sure if the school doctor had seen it or not. Even though she had removed everything as soon as possible, but, what is it? Is there a secret in the laptop? The school doctor chuckled. Bojo grabbed her hair, looking troubled. I have to play games tonight and school is over. I won't bring it tomorrow. Seems like there really is a secret. The school doctor opened the youngster's bag, pulling the laptop out. You weren't just playing games, right? Bojo's hand tightened in her pocket. She reached out with her other hand as though she wanted to stop the school doctor's actions. But it was obvious she wouldn't be able to make it in time. The laptop was flipped open, the screen lighting up. The school doctor glanced at the video on the table, arching a brow. You're watching such a thing. Bojo reached out, closing the laptop. Her face was flushed. The school doctor chuckled. That's normal, who hasn't been young before? It isn't appropriate to hand such a thing to your form teacher. Look at the school rules, it's better not to bring such electronic products in. Bojo replied, returning the bag to her hands. In that instant, the school doctor hadn't seen anything, such as the video recording. Bojo had closed the laptop at the right time. The video was enough for many to ignore the small logo at the bottom of the screen. The clock on the wall had struck 6. There weren't any other students in the infirmary at this moment. A faint yellow light shone in. Bojo hadn't noticed the gaze of the school doctor behind her. His gaze was deep and probing. The next moment, the phone rang. The school doctor picked up the phone, placing it by his ear. Hello. Fan Jia, you're back. I've checked the information, there aren't any problems. It was Scorpion. Should I contact Prince? The school doctor walked to the window, his gaze never leaving the young man. You can contact him. Stall him for 2 days. I'll finish this quickly. After 2 days, we'll have a lot of helpers. Soon, when they realize what's going on and want to save him, they'll realize that these people will only make them feel the existence of hell. The school doctor's voice was clearly different from before. When facing the students, he seemed like a listener. But in reality, once you listened, you would be able to understand everyone's psychology better. The investigators had thought of many ways to investigate the methods the school doctor had used to contact the students and the methods he had used to hypnotize them. But after half a day of investigation, there hadn't been any results. Kwong was in the school, and with his identity, no one would suspect anything. No one would have expected the gentle and harmless school doctor to be the creator of all the darkness. Kwong's disguise was perfect. Rather than calling it a disguise, it would be more accurate to say that he was a doctor. As a professor, he knew what the students were thinking. Moreover, he majored in psychology. It didn't seem out of place for him to be in the school. Hence, it wasn't just the military who hadn't found Kwong. Even Bojo hadn't thought about it. That was the most dangerous part. At this moment, more than 1,000 kilometers away, in a messy residential area, there was a huge shed. Occasionally, there would be a few people holding onto semi-automatic assault rifles, patrolling the area. Inside the shed, there were all kinds of gambling games, and the tables for each game were surrounded by gamblers. The gamblers present were all shouting the numbers they wanted, hoping that they could win a lot here. But the most eye-catching thing wasn't the chips on the table, it was the smell of smoke. Are you sure this is the place they arranged to meet? Prince, who had been pretending to be a nouveau riche, turned to ask Hunter. Hunter tilted his head. They contacted Boss, the firearms seller is the middleman. What do you think? Prince lowered his voice. This is no different from being trapped in a wolf's den. Why would Boss agree? Even if he agreed, he should have prepared some weapons. Why do you think he asked you to wear this outfit? Hunter shifted, his bodyguard positioning was perfect. Prince asked, isn't Boss trying to make it obvious that I'm rich? Right here, among so many people, he was the only one who was wearing a large leather coat. His clothes were all made of metal, and the sound of metal clanking could be heard. But very quickly, Prince realized he might not be able to wear the leather outfit because there was a detection door installed at the entrance of the casino. No metallic items could be brought into the casino, and anyone who wanted to enter had to go through the detection door. Hence, other than the drug bandits, no one else was allowed to bring weapons into the casino, not even a nail clipper. A hint of nervousness flashed past Prince's eyes when he saw the door. He couldn't help but glance at the person beside him. The devil was indeed a devil. No matter what he saw, he could remain calm and his aura was strong. He only said one sentence to Prince, "Don't bother, let's go." He wasn't sure if it was because of the devil's aura, but Prince took on the attitude of a nouveau riche. His eyes seemed to grow on top of his head as he walked forward. "Sir, you can't enter like this." As expected, the bodyguard in black extended his hand. Hunter and Exorcist glanced at each other. They didn't have any hidden equipment on them, but Prince's metallic items were enough for the detector to go off. Besides, they weren't ordinary decorations. Some weapons looked like that after they were dismantled. The moment the bodyguard in black walked over, Chin Mo spoke before he could. "Your boss invited us here. Are you not going to let us in because you don't want this business anymore?" When the bodyguard in black heard this, he stopped in his tracks. In fact, forget about the reaction of the bodyguards in black. Even if the boss of the other party was here, he would probably be shocked by his boss's aura. The bodyguard in black hesitated. "Hold on." With that, he turned and spoke into the Bluetooth earpiece. Very quickly, he walked back. It's a misunderstanding. Boss has been waiting for you for a long time. Please. Chapter 12:27. Let them in. Scorpion glanced at the screen in front of him. From the moment they had entered, Scorpion had been watching their every move. There was no sound, but he could see their actions. It was indeed as the rumors had said. He wasn't sure about other things, but in terms of money, they shouldn't be faking it. He was afraid that there would be other problems. But since nothing had happened on Old Q's side, it proved that this group of people could try to interact and hold them back. Scorpion stood up with his wine glass, reaching out to turn off the screen. At the very least, he couldn't let them know that he was observing them. Change to another room. Yes. The people standing at the side were all carrying long guns. Gun ownership was legal in Country T. Moreover, in such a place, no one would care. But recently, Country T had been putting in more effort to deal with drugs. That was why Scorpion wanted to clear the goods in his hands as soon as possible. It was easy in Country T, as long as there were enough profits, there would be people who would give them convenience. The difficult part was the exit. Even though they had many overseas markets, their biggest market was China. China had already joined forces with many countries to exert pressure on the TM region, as though they were determined to eradicate them. But in this place, some laws weren't useful. Hence, they couldn't use China's methods. They were worried that the other party would try to get information out of them. They weren't afraid because no one could find them in the Golden Triangle. Even this place was just a distribution point. They could use this distribution point to test the other party, to see if they really had the money and connections to do business or if they had other motives. Scorpion seemed to be in charge of everything, but in reality, every step he took was an order from Kwang. With such a huge lineup, even Old Q had thought that Kwang would come. That was what he had told Prince and the rest. Even though Crown Prince looked a little dumb, he was actually very vigilant in this aspect. Before coming, he had asked his boss what he would do if he saw Kwang. But his boss had only replied, "He won't be here, today was just a test." Prince hadn't understood at the time, but now that he saw Scorpion welcoming them, he understood everything. On the other side, Scorpion was dressed in black and had a tattoo on his face. When he looked over, his gaze carried a darkness that was different from that of an ordinary person. "Sit," Scorpion said in the local language, a glass of wine in his hand, his aura menacing. Prince wasn't inferior, he sat down and went straight to the point. "Tell me, how many goods do you have? I want all of them." After listening to the translator, Scorpion leaned back. "We do have a lot of goods, but the current situation is that China's control is very strict. I have a lot of connections that I can't use, and we can't even get through the customs. Our people can't just take out the goods casually, and it's impossible to estimate how much we have. Old Q should have told you that we have a special plantation base, and the quantity is easy to handle, but how can you guarantee that you can enter the border? Old Q should have told you about the goods." In order to feign ignorance, Crown Prince waited for the translator to finish before replying, "Of course we have our own ways." Scorpion raised an eyebrow, "I want to know the specifics." "Specifics?" Prince's fingers paused, but he didn't speak. After all, ever since he came in, his every move had been planned by his boss. If Prince were to explain in detail how to avoid the customs, he wouldn't be able to. On the other side, Scorpion was still looking at him. Seeing that he did not reply immediately, his eyes gradually narrowed. Prince knew very well what those gazes were. Guesses, suspicions, and even danger. His hand tightened on the handle of the chair. The surrounding air turned cold as well. His heartbeat also changed accordingly. The people standing at the side were all armed with guns, and they were all looking over. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Scorpion was about to ask another question. Chin Mo, who was standing at the side, said casually, "The specific method will affect the interests of some people. Our boss has connections with the customs. It's not just the customs, we also have connections with other places. This is the most important aspect of doing business in China. We can't guarantee that every batch of goods will pass, but we will be able to hear the news. How can the checks not be strict? The reason our business is so big is also because of our connections." Chin Mo's words were very realistic. In less than a second, Scorpion's expression clearly changed after listening to the story. All these years, he had been trying to build his own connections in China. But later on, he realized that he needed a background to achieve that. At this point, everything was clear. It seemed like they weren't just rich, they were probably from an old family in China. Previously, when they were at Old Q's place, he had heard their conversation. The person in the leather trench coat was just a rich second-generation heir. The real decision-maker was the investment consultant. At that time, he hadn't understood why such a capable person would be willing to work for a rich second-generation heir. But now, everything was clear. It was because of his family background. Scorpion raised his hand and pressed it down. Prince knew that the deal was almost ruined. It wasn't just ruined, Scorpion's suspicions towards them had reached a certain level. Only, under such circumstances, his boss was able to resolve all their suspicions with one sentence. Chin Mo hadn't finished his sentence. "We are here to earn money. We are more concerned about safety than you, especially when it comes to entering the country. But until now, we haven't seen your sincerity in working together. We haven't even seen your real boss. We will wait for your boss to be willing to meet us before we can talk." With that, Chin Mo stood up. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, giving off a strong sense of business aura. "We are also looking at the cooperation." Scorpion stood up as well. "Sir, don't be in such a hurry. We are sincere in our cooperation, but there has been a huge commotion in China recently. It's better to be careful. As for our boss, he has the same intentions. If we meet a spy here, we won't be able to cry even if we want to. Once everything is ready and we can officially proceed with the transaction, our boss will appear. But before that, we need to take a look. From the sounds of it, we are suspected to be a spy." Prince scoffed. "You really have a lot of concerns." This was Prince's persona. It wasn't a problem for him to say such things. Scorpion chuckled, walking over. "Our sincerity is the same as yours. But there are some things that need to be investigated thoroughly. You can investigate however you want." Chin Mo glanced over, his elegant aura forming. "But my boss doesn't give me much time. I have to give him an answer by the day after tomorrow. That is the deadline. If you wish to continue the discussion, you can contact me anytime." With that, Chin Mo glanced over at Prince. Prince was confused. This wasn't what they had agreed on. Hadn't they agreed on a deal today? Could it be? Prince lifted his lids, glancing over at Chin Mo's hand. He had one hand in his pocket, and his slender fingers were tapping there. It seemed like a casual action, but it was a signal. "There's a change in the situation, retreat immediately." There was nothing more, just these 8 words. But even so, in that instant, Prince felt the change in the atmosphere. No one knew what had changed. Except for Fatty, who was still in the car. Not because of anything else, but because he saw a familiar face that made his heart sink. Fan Jia. The culprit who had created so many unfair cases in Jiang City. Why was she here all of a sudden? After all, they had received news that she wasn't in charge of such matters. Therefore, when Fatty saw that face, he immediately sent a message to the inside. He could only send a message once because that was the extent of his infiltration. Especially when Fatty thought of something else. That Fan Jia seemed to have seen their boss before. Fatty's eyes widened. He tried to contact his boss for the second time. The situation inside was complicated. Before the discussion was settled, Scorpion wouldn't let Chin Mo leave. Hence, it was inevitable that time would be delayed. When Chin Mo heard that she had already entered, his gaze deepened. "Boss, you need to think about it. We need to think about it too. If you really think too much, you can arrange some entertainment programs for us. As for the official matters, we can discuss them after your investigation." Scorpion chuckled. "That can be done. We don't have many things here, but we have plenty of entertainment programs." Prince listened at the side. He didn't understand why his boss had brought up this topic and even mentioned entertainment programs. But deep down, he knew that it was directly related to the change in the situation. Magician and Hunter had been on many overseas missions. It was just that during this kind of mission, the other party had never found a beautiful woman to accompany them. The most important thing was that boss actually picked one out of the bunch. His lips curled into a faint smile. "The rest are yours." The girl who was chosen felt her heart almost jumping out of her chest. She had never seen such a charismatic man. This time, she was really lucky. Whether it was Hunter or Prince, they couldn't accept the fact that their boss had chosen a girl just like that. Under normal circumstances, their boss would reject all women. Chapter 12:28. Chin Mo had done this. It was to avoid meeting Fan Jia face to face. Even though he had put on a disguise, if one took a closer look, they would still be able to see traces. The best way was to prevent her from seeing him at a close distance. He might even disappear from the surveillance cameras in the lobby. From the moment he entered, he knew there were cameras everywhere. Even though he seemed to be walking casually, he had never been caught in front of a camera. This time, there was an extra person blocking the camera. Prince was still in a daze when he saw Fan Jia. Magician's gaze changed when he saw Fan Jia walking in. Fan Jia hadn't seen them in Jiang City. However, they knew which cases were committed by this person. She hid in the university and used the internet to cover up the truth. If boss hadn't locked onto her, even now, Jiang City wouldn't have peace. That was the first time Magician understood how unfathomable a person's heart was. Fan Jia seemed to be able to brainwash people. He didn't know why people would respond to the things she did. The case that left the deepest impression on Magician was the copyright infringement case. In his heart, stealing was a crime. How could a thief be supported? He couldn't understand. But such things and such people existed in this world. The funniest thing was that they thought they were kind. It turned out that ignorant kindness was scarier than pure evil. Besides, they were tolerating a thief who didn't admit to stealing. But life was like the original novel. No matter how much you liked someone, you shouldn't use any excuses to offend someone. To put it bluntly, when he committed these crimes, didn't he have any idea what was going on? It was obvious that he knew everything. It was just that some people connived, which was why these people became even more profitable. Fan Jia knew better than them what the people on the internet were thinking. When she was escaping, they were able to find a hostage who was willing to divert her attention. They rarely failed their missions. Ever since they encountered this organization, they had to think a lot about every step they took. This was because this organization knew where to start and what methods to use to suppress their actions. Regardless of what happened, they couldn't lay their hands on ordinary citizens, even if their hearts were black. Magician clenched his fists, worried that Fan Jia would recognize him. Moreover, he didn't know why, but there was a faint sense of unease in his heart. That uneasiness was not because he was afraid of the other party. But he was afraid that everything would repeat itself. She was still dressed like that. Some people seem to be like that. No matter what they did, they wouldn't feel guilty. They would blame everything on someone else and still think that they were innocent. Therefore, she didn't change her appearance. She still looked like a student. As soon as she walked in, many gamblers stopped what they were doing. However, they recognized Fan Jia. With a glance, they lowered their heads and continued gambling. With this time difference, Qin Mo and his men disappeared into the crowd and passed through the entertainment hall safely. A few burly men standing guard at the third door were holding semi-automatic machine guns and scanning the surroundings with serious expressions. The safety on the machine guns was off, ready to fire at any time. Magician heaved a sigh of relief. That side profile shouldn't have been seen. Even though Qin Mo was walking in front, he could still hear what was happening behind him. His deep eyes darkened again. The girl following Qin Mo was still thinking about how to make this handsome and rich man stay. Her heart was beating rapidly and her cheeks were flushed. What the girl didn't expect was that they really did get a room. However, after getting a room, the man was much colder than when he was outside. Qin Mo opened his wallet, pulling out a wad of cash and placing it on the cabinet. He leaned against the window and took out a lighter. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, his voice calm. "How much money can you get here?" The girl didn't understand why he would ask such a question. But no one was like him, coming in without touching her, as though she had germs on her. Qin Mo held the cigarette between his fingers as he continued. "I can give you 10 times and even send you back home." The girl's eyes lit up. She had been abducted to this place. She had come overseas to look for a job, but she hadn't expected it to be such a job. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of escaping, but she had been caught every single time. "Brother Scorpion's power is so great, it's impossible," the girl said softly. Qin Mo replied slowly, "We are working together, he will do me this favor." The girl's eyes lit up. She was curious as to how the man knew she wanted to return home. It was a pity that the man didn't seem to want to talk to her. "Do you agree or not?" The girl blushed again. "Okay. Then create a commotion. It has to be bigger than the one next door." With that, Qin Mo put out the cigarette in the ashtray and reached out to open the window. The girl instantly understood what he meant. But even though she understood, when the man disappeared from the window, she couldn't help feeling disappointed. That kind of person probably wouldn't be interested in people like her. The girl walked over and kept the money on the cabinet. In the entertainment hall, Fan Jia didn't say much. Instead, she lowered her voice and whispered into Scorpion's ear, "Where is the consultant that you mentioned? Once I meet him, I can investigate his identity. If you had come earlier, you would have been able to see him, but now..." Scorpion smiled. "He's still busy inside. All of them are here. You can take a look. The one in the leather coat is the young master inside. He's stupid but has a lot of money. His father should have a strong background there. Go check it out. If there's no problem, we'd better close the deal as soon as possible. After all, we're not the only ones they want to work with." Fan Jia glanced over at Prince, who was gambling. She watched his extravagant lifestyle, the way he hugged the girl so skillfully that she couldn't see any problems. But this was her master's order. She couldn't make any mistakes, she had to make sure everything was right. "Bring me to the consultant." Fan Jia's eyes sank. "The room is the only place without a surveillance camera, how can you be sure he is fine?" Scorpion's fingers paused, as though he had realized the problem as well. He led Fan Jia in. Magician and Prince looked like they were indulging themselves, but in reality, they weren't looking at the wine. They were looking at the images reflected through the wine glasses. When they saw the two of them heading in the direction Qin Mo had gone, their hands tightened around the wine glasses. Magician almost bolted up from his seat, but without his boss's orders, none of them could move. Hence, he could only panic. Why did the two of them go to the boss's side? Did Fan Jia notice something? No, that wasn't possible. Fan Jia shouldn't have seen anything at that moment. Magician told himself to calm down, but those who hadn't experienced the previous mission wouldn't be able to understand the feeling. His fingers couldn't help but reveal some of his emotions. At this moment, Prince bolted up from his seat. But his actions were much more natural. He pushed his cards forward. Boring. He tilted his head and looked at his nominal bodyguard. Let's go somewhere else to play. When he said this, Prince glanced to the side. His meaning was obvious. He wanted Magician to pay attention to the camera. If he wasn't careful, he might be caught. Magician released his hand, breaking into a smile. He seemed to have found his previous self, unrestrained and unrestrained. I think it's a good place. Young master, shall we go for a walk? Let's go. Prince heaved a sigh of relief. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he could sense his comrade's emotions. The emotions were definitely related to his boss. The two of them glanced at each other. Prince took a step forward, still looking like a rich second-generation heir who reared fur and walked his dog. At this moment, Fan Jia and Prince were almost at Qin Mo's room. Scorpion wanted to signal for the person behind him to take out the key to open the door. Unexpectedly, the moment he pressed on the doorknob, the ambiguous sounds came from the room. Fan Jia heard it too, frowning. Scorpion chuckled. See, I told you that you are overthinking. You don't understand. No matter how capable a man is, he will fall for such things. Who would think about whether there is a camera in the room when they are working? The sounds grew louder. It was this sound that dispelled most of Fan Jia's suspicions. Someone so obsessed with women didn't seem like someone sent by China. Just as this thought settled in her mind, someone walked over. More people walked over. It was Prince and the rest. Prince looked as though he had just met them. Then he smiled like a rich man. Boss Poison, what are you going to do? I wanted our expert hacker to meet Consultant. Even though she doesn't appear often, she should be able to find something online. She should be able to chat with Consultant, but I didn't expect him to be busy. Gambler's words sounded like he was being straightforward, but there was a small trap hidden in it. He wanted to see how they would react when they heard about the expert hacker. After all, no matter what kind of spy they were, they would be afraid of finding out their true identity. Prince reacted, his face filled with excitement. He even whistled. Expert hacker. So amazing. Like 007. When are you going to show me? Scorpion wasn't going to let them know how amazing Fan Jia was. He had only mentioned it to see their reaction. Now that Prince had asked him, it wasn't easy for him to reply. He could only change the topic. There's quite a commotion here. It isn't a good place to talk. Let's go somewhere else. That's fine too. The Crown Prince shouted towards the door, Advisor, take it easy. He said that so that his image wouldn't collapse. But Prince's heart had already collapsed. What was going on? Boss, was it for real? That voice couldn't be faked. Indeed, it couldn't be faked. But no one knew that the girl had been alone in the room the entire time. Young Master Qin had already landed. His movements were swift and nimble, not making a sound when his feet touched the ground. In a place where there were no cameras, he would not have so many scruples. He strode toward the business car parked not far away. Fatty, who was still anxious, made a decision to contact the higher-ups to get her back. Regardless, it was more important to keep her safe. There was a swoosh. The car door was pulled open. Fatty's eyes widened as he stared at the noble face. He couldn't help but ask, Boss, why are you here? Is it strange that I'm here? Chin Mo's voice didn't change at all. Fatty opened his mouth, wanting to ask how it wasn't strange. Shouldn't you be in the room? But when he glanced at his boss's aura, he didn't have the courage to ask. Chin Mo sat down, tilting his head towards the commotion outside the car window. From now on, stop all intrusions to prevent them from noticing anything. Go in and ask them to come out, it's time for them to have a taste of the cold. Yes, Fatty replied before alighting. Chin Mo dialed a string of numbers. He didn't call Bojo, instead, he called the old general. Besides talking about the progress, he was calling the old general because he couldn't control himself anymore. He missed her and knew that if he called her, she would be able to find out where he was. Fan Jia's appearance reminded Chin Mo of the last time he closed his eyes. She had been wearing a mask, floating on the surface of the water, on her last breath. Chin Mo's fingers tightened, unable to adjust his emotions. Right now, he just wanted to know about her. Chin Mo had never felt such a long phone call. Until a voice came from the other end. Hello. Chin Mo opened his eyes, his voice faintly. Fan Jia is here, Fatty's skills won't be able to fool her. Get someone to send Prince's photo and news to prove that he is a rich second-generation heir. I'll get someone to do it immediately. The old general's expression was solemn. This was a critical period and he was afraid of missing out on a call from Chin Mo. It was best if they didn't contact him when he was out for an overseas mission. Chin Mo had mentioned that he would contact them if anything happened. How are you guys? Are you alright? The old general was still worried about their safety, especially if they had a hacker. Their communication would be a problem and they would have to deal with Kwang as well. Chin Mo replied, you guys disguised yourselves well. The old general heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 12:29. After hearing this, the old general was stunned. His hand that was holding onto the phone was a little stiff. However, he had already communicated this matter with the higher-ups. When Chin Mo was outside, no one knew what was wrong with him. His hypnosis would be triggered. He couldn't let him know that the kid had left yet. Since Tang Mo was the one who wanted to go over, there wouldn't be any problems. The old general steadied his tone. I did. Where did you find him? He's so smart that it's hard to fool him. How did you reply? Chin Mo was still looking out of the window, analyzing the situation. The old general let out a long sigh. It's all according to what you said before you left. However, before he could finish, the child had already driven off. Even now, the old general was still throwing a tantrum because of this matter. Seriously, he felt that he had let down Chin Mo. But he had no choice. Other than calling the Tang family to ask for Chin Mo, there was nothing else he could do. Moreover, anything that affected Chin Mo's emotions during this period would be fatal. Fortunately, the mission would be completed in 2 days. The old general glanced at the time and said, what else do you need? If not, I'll inform my superiors immediately. It's okay, you can go. Chin Mo hung up the phone, still feeling uneasy. He lit a cigarette for himself as though this was the only way to suppress his emotions. Perhaps no one knew. Ever since Chin Mo came to this place, there would always be some fragmented images and sounds in his mind. He tilted his head and could vaguely see the red line around his neck. Below the red line was an amulet. Chin Mo took out the amulet and held it in his palm. Under the sunlight, his side profile still carried an air of nobility that couldn't be dispersed. The operation went smoothly and they retreated in time. No one was left behind. Both prince and magician were stunned when they saw Chin Mo in the car. After all, they had heard the live version. Even though they were standing outside the door, the sound was clear. boss should be in the room, why was he here? The two of them glanced at each other and asked instinctively, the sound in the room just now. Is it that hard to buy a cry? Chin-mo placed the amulet down and leaned back. His tone was indifferent. On the other hand, the two of them admired each other like idiots. Prince couldn't help but sigh in his heart. There was actually such a method. Little Black, your brother is really the devil, the top-notch kind. He must have predicted that someone would go there and simply bribe the young lady inside. This was really awesome. Magician spoke up. Fan Jia is here. If boss appears again, she might recognize him. Hearing this, the atmosphere in the car fell into a moment of silence. After all, they could have caught this person back then, but because of a hostage, they kept the hidden danger until now. Prince didn't know what had happened. But looking at everyone's expressions, he could guess a thing or two. The current situation was not in their favor. Chin-mo raised his hand and glanced at the time. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Instead, there was a layer of ice. When she recognizes me, it will be time for her to collect her corpse. Magician knew that his boss wasn't joking. After all, his boss had intended to do so back then. Fan Jia was too dangerous. She and Kwang were the same type of person. She would subtly influence others, treating the wrong as the right, using hatred as the dominant factor in their thoughts. Such a person would only consider things from his own point of view. Gradually, they lost their bottom line. Their worldview could be different. But once they lost their bottom line, they would harm the heavens and distort the truth. That wasn't a problem of worldview. It was a problem in itself. The scariest thing was that these people claimed to be weak. When their hearts were twisted, they were scarier than demons. Fan Jia and Kwang were experts in nurturing such people. At this moment, everyone realized something. They couldn't be like before, doing whatever they wanted. Because the real battle was coming. This was a psychological battle, it wasn't something that could be won just by being anxious. Time was tight, but when it came to Chin-mo, there wasn't a single ripple. The operation team stopped. For the past 2 days, young master had been spending money like a butterfly. He spent a lot of money to buy this and that. Now that he suddenly stopped, his hands were itching. The moment this thought entered his mind, his boss's phone rang. The caller ID showed that it was Scorpion. Chin-mo sat there, looking at the screen indifferently. It lit up for a while before dimming. This was the second one. Prince didn't understand what his boss was thinking. After all, everything they had done for the past 2 days was to get Scorpion to work with them. Now that Scorpion had taken the initiative, his boss still didn't seem anxious. If he was really worried about being recognized, he could have just sent him. Did his boss have other plans? That was what Prince thought. After less than half an hour, Chin-mo reached for the phone on the table and called back. His tone was calm and indifferent. I'm sorry, Boss Scorpion. I was discussing the price with someone and switched my phone to silent mode. What's the matter? Prince glanced at the glass of red wine and the assembled sniper rifle. He was impressed by his boss's imposing manner even when he was lying. It was obvious how black-bellied he was. Scorpion believed Chin-mo completely because his spies had told him that after this group of people became the main tank, they didn't just want to work with them. That was what worried Scorpion the most. He smiled and said, I've already told my boss what the consultant said last time, but he hasn't replied yet. As for the consultant, I hope he won't be unable to get through. Scorpion was a deep thinker and thought about many things. With the cold weather, Scorpion started to worry that this batch of business would be snatched away. Hence, he didn't pay much attention to Chin-mo's identity anymore. Chin-mo still didn't show much enthusiasm. Scorpion hung up the phone. He narrowed his eyes and dialed another number. In the infirmary, a school doctor looked at the caller ID, turned off his phone, and put it in his pocket. When he passed by a certain class, the corners of his mouth curled up. He glanced at the police who had infiltrated not far away and pushed up his glasses. So what if they found out that there was something wrong with this class? Some people had always been like this. And as the creator, he was merely guiding them into what they should be. If he could settle things here as soon as possible, he could go back and meet up with those people and see what kind of people they were. He could leave the rest to that child. After all, he had never disappointed him before. Regardless of whether it was in terms of making up stories or guiding willpower, he was good. Those foolish people thought that the problems in this school were recent. What a joke. He had chosen this place because there had been problems since a long time ago. He was well aware of the environment in which children with wild beasts would be born. He also knew that they would infect each other. After a long period of incubation, coupled with some acquired factors, it would explode. Kwong was satisfied with such an environment. The girls would let the soft-hearted one run around to buy things. Everyone seemed to be laughing together, but in reality, they were laughing because of her. Was it the girls' fault? Yes, they were. However, such a phenomenon was never a one-sided phenomenon. Compared to bullies, Kwong preferred those who didn't dare to retaliate even after being bullied. Oh, no, it should be said that when someone wanted to resist, some people who were not involved would make all sorts of sounds to suppress that voice. Those who made sarcastic remarks and couldn't tell right from wrong were more suitable to be his fodder than bullies. After all, everything complemented each other. Dr. Wu, the school will be screening a movie tomorrow. They said it's a good movie for the students. The students liked the one that was screened last time. Do you have any good ones? Kwong glanced over, looking refined and elegant. Of course. That's great. The teacher in charge of screening the movie chuckled. Yes, that's great. Be it the time or the location, everything was perfect. Kwong walked forward. The teacher watched the back view of the school doctor with a frown. Did Dr. Wu's legs catch a cold? Why did he seem to be walking awkwardly today? But the teacher didn't think too much about it. When he glanced into the classroom, he realized that the new transfer student wasn't in school. Indeed, Bojo wasn't in school. Instead, she was in her school uniform, a school bag slung over her shoulders. She pressed the doorbell naturally. Coming. The woman opened the door. When she saw the youngster's attire, she was slightly taken aback. You are. Bojo smiled, revealing her canine teeth. She was radiant, her hair still dripping with raindrops. Hello, Auntie, I'm Li Jin's classmate. My teacher saw that I live nearby and asked me to inform him that there's a movie tomorrow. Also, this is his book. The woman was puzzled. Since when did her son have such a classmate? But her son wasn't a talkative person. He didn't even go to school recently. The woman had wanted to ask about the situation, but it seemed like there wasn't a need. Little Jean went out, he'll be back in a while. The woman was a gentle person. She watched as it started to rain. The weather is really bad, it's sunny one moment and then it's raining the next. Is your house far? Bojo didn't reply. Instead, she sneezed and reached out to rub the bridge of her nose. She was drenched in the rain because of her son's book. The woman couldn't let her leave just like that. Child, come in and hide from the rain. You can leave after the rain subsides. Thank you, Auntie. Bojo was obedient. Chapter 1230. Li Jin was the only one who was absent. Regardless of whether her guess was right or wrong, she had to interact with him to find out more. If there was something wrong with Li Jin, she would be able to find Kwang by following the clues. Come, drink some water. The woman's words pulled Bojo back to her senses. Auntie has something to ask you too. Bojo smiled. Go ahead. Did someone bully little Jean in class? Look at what I'm saying, this child doesn't want to go to school. I'm a little worried, so I asked the teacher, but the teacher couldn't say anything. Isn't it always shown on TV that children don't like to go to school? It's very likely that they've been bullied at school. His father and I are usually too busy to take care of him, so he grows slower than normal children. His physical condition isn't very good either. Now, he often goes to school in the infirmary, and he even runs in the morning. I'm just worried that something is wrong with him and that he won't be able to get over it. Bojo glanced up. I'm sorry, Auntie, I just transferred over and don't understand the situation in class. It's fine, I'm just asking. The woman smiled. When you see little Jean later, don't tell him that I'm asking you about such things, he won't be happy. Okay, Bojo agreed. The woman stood up, glancing at the clock subconsciously. Bojo felt a hint of fear in her gaze. This was her home, what was she afraid of? Soon, Bojo knew what she was afraid of. It was because of the man who had returned drunk. Bojo guessed that the woman had let her in not just to shelter from the rain but also because she wouldn't be as afraid with another person around. Why is it so cold? The man complained loudly the moment he entered. Tell me, what do I need you to do? You can't even take care of a home, you're useless. The woman took the things from the man's hands. The heater hasn't been turned on yet, little Jin's classmate is here. Hearing the last sentence, the man swallowed back his curses, but his expression was still not very good. It looked like he needed to beat someone up to appease his anger. Where's the food? Why aren't you cooking at this hour? Who are you trying to starve to death? The man lowered his voice. But even so, Bojo could hear it. The woman said in a low voice, Our son hasn't come back yet. We can eat when he comes back. There are still people here, that's your son, not mine. The man said. Bojo couldn't hear clearly. Perhaps the two of them also knew that they shouldn't wash their dirty linen in public. Bojo had done a background check on Li Jean. His mother had brought him over to remarry. Before she came here, it wasn't that she hadn't expected some things to happen. She just didn't expect such a family environment to be more complicated than she had imagined. The Almighty had once said that the occurrence of every case actually reflected the psychological demands of the criminal. Bojo tried to use the Almighty's method to describe a person. Of course, like the Almighty, she couldn't use psychological profiling to link that person's age, occupation, and even hobbies. However, the more he tried to prove himself to be an expert on the internet, the weaker he would be. The reason was simple. The more things you had, the less likely you were to show them off. You would only treat them as a pastime. The more one didn't have it, the more they would post it in their circle of friends, hoping that someone would see it. This is the most common example. Such a mindset was also applicable here. Judging from the king's actions, he liked to be in control, and he knew very well what kind of methods he could use to make someone feel uncomfortable even though they weren't punched or kicked. Unless he had experienced it himself and resisted. In that class, Li Jean was probably the first to be ostracized. But someone had suppressed his rebellious voice. It wasn't just in school, it was also in his family. Furthermore, he had always been submissive. Gradually, he had formed an inferiority complex. He had been giving orders online but in real life, it had been hard to notice him. If Bojo hadn't been sure before, now that she had seen Li Jin's family environment, she was certain it was him. Besides, Li Jin's stepfather was likely a violent person. Bojo analyzed the situation, her mind calm and meticulous. After spending a long time with someone, one would indeed be affected. If it had been the old Bojo, she wouldn't have thought so much. Bojo was right. The woman didn't want the youngster to leave. It wasn't easy for someone to come over and the man would restrain himself. This way, little Jean wouldn't be scolded when he returned. After all, the man was prideful. Hence, before Bojo could stand to leave, the woman spoke up. The woman was one step ahead of the young man. She said, "Your uncle said that the rain outside is getting heavier. Xiao Jin will be back in 5 minutes. You can go to Xiao Jin's room and stay for dinner. You can tutor Xiao Jin." "It's fine, Auntie," Bojo replied. The man walked over, the smell of alcohol still lingering on him. He wanted her to stay as well. Just as the woman had said, he was prideful. But when he glanced at the woman, there was a hint of viciousness. Even from where she was, Bojo could feel the woman's fear. She was trembling slightly, but she still stood beside the man like a hostess who valued peace. Bojo didn't reject him since she would be able to find out more if she went to his room. Besides, she had seen movies about domestic violence and understood that if such a marriage continued, the woman would probably be unwilling to leave. In China, marriage was more important to women than to men. Every single one of them had fantasized about marrying their Prince Charming and living a blissful life. But gradually, some problems would surface. They would realize that the person they liked wasn't the person they had imagined. He would fall in love with others because of the temptations of the outside world. Sometimes, it would be because he was under pressure and wanted to find excitement. Sometimes, it would be because the girls outside were young. He would think that they were flowers and you were an old woman. He would even beat you up. He would beat you up when he was drunk, beat you up when he was angry and beat you up when he was unhappy. At the start, it would be unbearable. After all, this wasn't the life you wanted. Countless people would come out to persuade you to bear with it. Even if it wasn't for yourself, you had to bear with it for the child. You couldn't divorce. If you divorced, what would people say about you? What would happen to the child? Hence, you would bear with it. The man who begged you to forgive him wouldn't cherish you anymore. Year after year, day after day, you would get used to such a life. If someone gave you a chance to retaliate, you might think that they were a busybody. After all, you just wanted your husband to treat you better. You didn't really want to leave him. This was part of the domestic violence family. Because no matter what happened, no matter how severe the beating, she was still his wife. What? How could he control his wife? His wife was willing to let him beat her. This was something that was often heard in court. Such a man wasn't hateful. He was hateful. But the funny thing was that once a woman stood up to resist, she would sue him in court. Some people would come out and make superficial comments. She even sued her own husband. What is this woman thinking? Isn't it just her own man cheating outside? It's obvious that he seduced her outside. She can just settle the score with that person. She still has to live her life. Why is she fighting with her husband? Women should be smarter sometimes. So what if she took a few beatings? Isn't it because she was lazy? I'm really impressed. Usually, it was the woman who said these words. And the scary thing was that domestic violence was addictive. In the long run, a woman wouldn't be able to leave a man who abused her. In psychology, some of the explanations were indeed frightening. But that was the reality. Those despicable people who liked to gossip and distort the truth were the real breeders. This world, in some ways, was very fair. What kind of person you were would attract the kind of people you were. If there were things that violated your principles, there would be people who would ask you to tolerate them. There was a beautiful relationship, but you needed to be able to tell if it was a really good man. Looking at the interaction between the two of them, Bojo quickly realized that the woman couldn't leave and wouldn't ask for a divorce. After all, other than fear, there was a hint of anticipation in her gaze. Bojo guessed that this was probably the reason for Li Jin's unhealthy mentality. After all, no child would be willing to see their mother being beaten. If it had been a child, he would have hated himself for being so weak and afraid. Because of his fear, he wouldn't even have the luck to save his mother. Thus, he would have wanted to escape. When he grew up, he would have shouted, "Why don't you get a divorce?" But by then, it would be too late. Children raised by sick families were usually extremely sensitive. Even if their family conditions weren't bad, they would still be like this. Bojo wasn't afraid of violent tendencies. Her skills wouldn't be at a disadvantage. If he was worried, then so be it. Li Jin would hide everything in his heart. He would wash away the blood on his hands without saying a word and look for his next target. If that was the case, then her visit today was very likely to be detected by him. Bojo paused. She placed the planning form to the side. She had to be more careful. This person was learning computer programming and psychology. No matter which one of these two doors was taken out, it was very strange. Especially the latter. Now, whenever Bojo saw the word psychology, her heart would slow down. She couldn't let anyone see that the books had been touched. Bojo placed them back the way she had pulled them out. She had done it professionally. She wanted to see if there were any traces on the computer. She turned on the computer. Bojo frowned when she saw the date circled in red on the calendar on the wall. The 26th. Chapter 12:31. Bojo moved, about to walk over. The soft sound of the door lock came from behind her. Almost instantly, Bojo switched off the monitor. She used one hand to press on the computer while the other reached for her phone. She leaned against the desk. That was the scene Li Jin saw when he entered. The youngster had his head lowered, his fingers moving slightly, his black hair covering his eyes. He looked extremely intense, even the sound effects could be heard. It was the game that had been trending recently. Li Jin knew the people around him were playing it. He glanced up, glancing towards Bojo before turning to look at his bookshelf. He seemed to be scanning the room for signs of movement, waiting for the youngster to notice him. Li Jin was a refined man, fair and clean as though he hadn't matured yet. He wasn't tall and didn't seem to sleep well. There were obvious dark circles under his eyelids. His eyes were deep but there wasn't any life in them. He looked like a malnourished person who often stayed up late. Moreover, he was very quiet. He was so quiet that when you first saw him, you would think that this boy was easy to bully. Bojo lifted her lids, a lollipop in her mouth. When she saw him, she straightened, her guard down. Li Jin. It's raining outside, Auntie asked me to come in. Li Jin didn't reply, taking in the youngster's discomfort. He lowered his lashes, hiding his emotions. Bojo glanced out of the window. Is it still raining? If it isn't, I'll head back. It's still raining, Li Jin replied. Bojo chuckled. Then I'll have to stay here to seek shelter. He was lying. The sound of the rain had stopped, how could it still be raining? Bojo returned to her original position without a change in expression, her fingers still moving across the screen. She tilted her head and asked, Do you want to play? Do you want to play together? I'm not playing. Li Jin sat in front of the computer, his actions seemingly casual but in reality, he was checking something. Bojo saw everything. Like a gaming addict, she even turned on the voice message. The top lane, retreat, don't go that way, take a detour. Li Jin listened to the commotion, closing the calendar on the wall silently. He turned towards Bojo, who was still immersed in her game. he didn't say a word. Until the sound of plates shattering came from downstairs. Bojo lifted her head abruptly and walked towards the door like a normal customer. What happened to the kitchen? Li Jin remained silent as though he was used to it. Bojo wondered if she could see any other emotions on his face. No. Besides standing there. His face was devoid of any emotion. Even though the sound was getting louder and louder. The noise that entered his ears was incomparably clear. You can't even serve a dish. Tell me, what else can you do? It's fine if you're just a piece of trash, but you even brought a money-losing product to me. Don't be like this, there are guests at home. The woman lowered her voice. The man inhaled deeply, glancing over just in time to catch sight of Bojo and Li Jin. He adjusted his collar, probably not wanting to embarrass himself in front of outsiders. He reeked of alcohol as he headed upstairs. Bojo felt that she should be feeling awkward, hence, she stood there in a daze, stopping her game. Li Jin walked towards the woman, his voice calm. He hit you again. Little Jean, what are you talking about? The woman glanced at Li Jin, indicating that there was a guest. Your dad has a bad temper and with the alcohol, it's inevitable for him to shout. Li Jin glanced at her, his expression empty. He's drunk for 24 days a month, which means you've been getting beaten up for 24 days. The woman hurriedly added, he's drunk when he's not drinking, he's not bad when he's not drinking, Li Jin interrupted. But he'll mock me during the meal. The woman tugged on her son's sleeves, trying to stop him from continuing. Li Jin glanced down at her. Are you still not divorcing? The woman didn't reply. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about it, but there were too many things to consider. Besides, he was really nice to her when he wasn't drinking. It seems like you really like being hit. Li Jin's eyes were filled with emotions when he said that. There was hatred, there was pity, there was fear, there was unbearable pain, and there was darkness that no one could see through. With a loud bang, the door slammed shut. Only Bojo and the woman were left in the living room, the atmosphere extremely quiet. There were still pieces of plates on the floor. Am I really useless? The woman reached out to cover her face. No one would want their child to hate them, but she could clearly see her uselessness in her son's eyes. Bojo wanted to say that she wasn't useless, but selfish and weak. She was selfish and didn't want to get a divorce, afraid of losing her current life. After all, there was a man around, but she used the child as an excuse. Probably, excuses like I did it for your own good or because I liked him were the most harmful. They didn't do it for others, they did it for themselves. But everyone had their own way of doing things. If she was Li Jin, the moment the man made a move, she would beat him into submission. He hadn't been able to retaliate in primary school. Now that he was in high school, his eyes were filled with fear and he didn't even have the courage to take a step forward. Yet, he was able to be unyielding in front of his mother. This was a contradictory trait for Li Jin. There was a sense of danger, but he was so weak and useless. This was probably the influence of his environment. But Bojo had a feeling something was about to happen. Based on Li Jin's words, the woman's answer had obviously affected his decision in some aspects. What decision would it be? Bojo lowered her gaze. The woman wiped her tears when she didn't reply. Why did I mention this to you? I'm so sorry, you came to deliver Xiao Jin's book and yet, you saw such a scene. Bojo shook her head hurriedly. The rain has stopped. Auntie, I'll be leaving now, don't let your imagination run wild, in the room just a door away. Li Jin listened to the commotion outside, his eyes darkening. His thick fringe covered his eyes, a faint light seeping out from the corner of his eyes. Chapter 1232. Soon, his phone buzzed. Transfer student. He's pretty smart, he's already in the group. After reading the reply, Li Jin typed 2 more words. Is that so? Does King suspect something is wrong with him? The girls in the class had indeed treated Li Jin as king, but they didn't know who he was in real life. Li Jin glanced at his laptop, his typing slowing down. He seems rather enthusiastic. He's all right. The teacher asked him to send some information to Li Jin and he agreed. Li Jin watched as his name appeared on the screen, his lips turning cold. Since that's the case, he'll be the clown from tomorrow onwards. He hated it when others saw how pathetic he was. Li Jin couldn't forget how it felt when those people bullied him, pushing his head outwards. In the end, he realized that humans were social animals. Not only did they live, but they also blindly followed others in their actions. As long as there was someone they could bully, they would swarm over. Li Jin remembered that he had recorded many things on his phone and passed them to the teacher, who had called for both parties' parents. But because the other party's father was a minor official in the county, his stepfather had given him a slap and his mother had apologized profusely. In the end, he had been kicked even harder by his classmates. They had even taken off his pants. Li Jin never went back to school. Instead, he used another identity to get close to them. Every single one of them wanted attention. Hence, he gave them attention. Gradually, everyone started to compare themselves, twisting the truth behind their backs, and lying became a daily routine. Regardless of their family background, they had to wear branded clothes. As long as they liked it, it was theirs. If others wanted it, they would call them stingy and proud of their lack of morals. It was too easy to use such people. By now, Li Jin had complete control over their minds, which was why they called him a clown. Whoever became a clown would be ostracized by the entire class. When Li Jin had chosen his students, it had been in line with their wishes. They had long wanted to teach them a lesson, but because of their status, they had to deal with the clown. Hence, he would give them the clown card. Everyone wanted to avoid becoming a clown, but they had never thought of leaving the group. That was because they enjoyed the feeling of being in a group. Choosing a transfer student this time was a last-minute decision. Even if there was nothing wrong with him, and no one had touched the things in his room, he hated it when someone appeared and broke the long-standing balance. Bojo guessed that she had been targeted. After all, Li Jin's thoughts were really deep. Bojo didn't leave in a hurry. She was being watched, not exposed. Li Jin probably did not suspect her. The people sent by the police probably wouldn't think of investigating high school students. Even if it was an investigation, it would definitely be done from the perspective of a victim. Hence, this gave Li Jin enough time to do something. But how did Li Jin know Kwang? What kind of method did he use to contact it? These things were crucial. As long as they understood these 2 points, they might be able to find out who Kwang was. Bojo held the steering wheel with one hand. She tilted her face slightly, her fingertips caressing her lips. This was something she often did when she was thinking. Chapter 1233. His father and I are usually too busy to take care of him, causing him to grow slower than other children. His body condition isn't good either. Now, he has to stay in the infirmary most of the time and can't even jog in the morning. I'm worried that something is bothering him and he might not be able to get over it. In the infirmary, Bojo sat up straight, placing one hand on the steering wheel. Suddenly, she did a beautiful drift. She finally understood why she had found the school doctor scent familiar when he had approached her. It was a drug that was only used when he was soaking corpses. He wasn't an ordinary school doctor. Everything could be explained now. Why had she felt sleepy when they had been chatting? Because Kwang was an expert in hypnosis. However, it was probably because he had spent too much time on her and was interrupted, so he didn't succeed. He had pretended to be the school doctor. On the surface, he had been treating the students. But in reality, everyone was the most defenseless when they were sick. With Kwang's skills, it was a piece of cake to guide the students psychologically at this moment. He should be the person most familiar with the student's condition. He would pick the smartest one and create a group. After that, he wouldn't need to do anything. He just had to watch from the side and the students would start to change. That was why Bojio felt that this brainwashing gathering was troublesome. You wouldn't be able to tell which of them wasn't affected. Time was crucial. Perhaps he was like this now, but after staying in a group for a long time, he would become another person. Gradually, he would start to habitually invade others and eventually, he would become vain. Whoever affected his vanity, he would distort the truth. When everyone became like this, the school wouldn't be able to be saved. How terrifying would a person who was corrupted from the root become after entering society? This would always be a mystery that no one could solve. Bojio drove at high speed. People were walking on the side of the road, watching a sleek black Lamborghini rush into the school. The guard was dumbfounded. The speed was too fast and he couldn't stop it. Bojio turned on her Bluetooth earpiece as she walked. I found Kwang. Kwang. Young Master Tang paused. He was smart. He's in school. MMH, Bojio replied. You definitely wouldn't expect him to be disguised as a school doctor. I really didn't expect it. No wonder I didn't find any problems even after checking all the teacher's information. After young Master Tang said that, he added, don't act on your own. Wait for backup to arrive. Beep, beep, beep. It was obvious that the youngster had hung up. The man pressed between his eyebrows. Without wasting any time, he immediately contacted the local spies. There were too many people in the school. If there were any dangerous people around, it would cause panic. When the time came, it would be difficult to control the situation. Kwang's biggest danger was that he was good at hypnosis. Perhaps he had already set up a trap without you knowing. It was impossible to tell how many people in the school were under his control. If it was too obvious, it would be easy for the other party to notice. At that time, all the students in the school would become his hostages. Hence, she had to find Kwang without alerting him. Bojio walked quickly. It was still drizzling, splashing onto her uniform, but she didn't seem to feel it. Her hair was wet and the students who were walking back and forth couldn't help but turn back to take a look. After all, this new transfer student was too handsome. Moreover, they felt that he looked a little familiar, but they just couldn't remember where they had seen him before. Bojio didn't stop. She reached over and with a swoosh, a military knife appeared from her long sleeves. When she reached the infirmary, she slowed down. After interacting with the Almighty for a long time, she also understood that many psychologists could not only analyze a person's mental state from their expression, but they could even calculate their breathing. Bojio paused outside for 3 seconds before walking in. At this hour, there weren't many people in the infirmary. Especially on such a gloomy and rainy day, other than the school doctor on duty, no one would be around. But today, it was even more deserted. In addition to the hospital bed, there was only the fountain pen on the table. Its owner was nowhere to be found. Bojio slowed down her footsteps. She turned and pressed her back against the wall. She turned sideways and pulled the curtain open. There wasn't anyone in the lounge. She walked back and forth twice and returned to her original position. She was just about to pick up the form on the table. A voice came from behind him with a chuckle. Which class are you from? Why are you here at this hour? Where do you feel unwell? Bojio paused, turning her head. Headache, it should be the flu. It's you. As the man spoke, he sat back in his seat and took out a thermometer. Looks like our new school hunk is a little weak. Let's test his temperature first. Bojo glanced at his refined face, taking the thermometer naturally and placing it in her mouth. The thermometers these days were more advanced and didn't need to be clipped under her arm, preventing her from being exposed. How did you catch a cold? Did you catch a cold wind? After saying that, the man unlocked his phone and a message appeared. It was about the young man standing before him. A contestant from Supreme Alliance. His fingers stilled and then he laughed. When he glanced up, the smile on his face changed. This was the person Fan Jia had mentioned, the person Qin Mo couldn't let go of. Should he say that she was unlucky or that he was lucky? Even though her hair color was different and her face was slightly different, Kawang never judged a person by their appearance. But Kawang never judged a person by their appearance. That was why he had gotten someone to investigate. He hadn't expected to find such a pleasant surprise. Since she was here, she shouldn't leave. Kawang placed the stethoscope down, a faint smile spreading across his face. He glanced at the time. It's almost time, pass me the thermometer. Bojo handed it over with one hand, her side profile clear and elegant. Kawang chuckled. She was indeed someone who knew how to disguise herself. If he hadn't had an impression of her, her disguise would have been able to fool him. It was impressive for a girl to disguise herself as a youngster without the slightest hint of awkwardness. It was a pity. She had met him. Kawang glanced at the thermometer, his voice still gentle and unguarded. You have a slight fever. Drink some medicine, I'll rush it up for you. 37:9. Bojo tilted her knife. He really knew how to lie. Thank you, teacher. Bojo sat down. Kawang chuckled lightly. You're welcome. The cold medicine was laced with sleeping ingredients. If she drank it, it would be easier for him to drop the hint. Since she was someone Qin Mo placed in his heart, she had to be treated differently. Being betrayed by the person he loved was more painful than knowing Qin Mo's true feelings. Kawang raised his hand, shaking the glass in his palm. He lowered his lids and passed the medicine to her. Drink it, once you drink it, you will become my puppet. Fan Jia hadn't found out Bojo's true identity. Hence, in Kawang's eyes, she was just a child who overestimated herself. He just had to use his usual methods on her. He hadn't expected what happened next to be completely out of his expectations. The moment the youngster took the glass, she flipped her hand, splashing all the water into his eyes. It happened in an instant. Bojo leaped up, the military knife in her hands pressed against Kawang's neck. When he felt the pain, Kawang narrowed his eyes in shock. But very quickly, he calmed down and broke into a light laugh. Not bad, with such speed, you must have suspected me long ago. You didn't show any signs of suspicion just now. Even though Qin Mo is crippled, it seems like he still has his psychological knowledge. Even the people around him seem smarter than the average person. But do you think you can catch me with your own strength? Hee, seems like Qin Mo didn't tell you, don't expose your back. Bojo turned instinctively when she heard Kawang's words. She watched as a person raised a stool and was about to smash her head. She turned swiftly, pressing down on the military knife with one hand. Bojo used her strength and kicked sideways. Bang! That person was kicked to the ground. Kawang made use of the time difference to leave Bojo's range. The person on the ground curled into a ball in pain, shouting, "Teacher, hurry up and leave." It was the girl who had been bullied, Lu Jianing. She grabbed onto Bojo's ankle, her eyes filled with hatred. Tomorrow, I'll take the lead and you'll be the clown. Do you know how important it is for me to take the lead? I was appointed by Wang and I was the one who created the group chat. Those who bully me won't have a good time from tomorrow onwards. Everyone will start to worship me again and pay attention to me. But you have to break the rules. You deserve to die, you deserve to die. Bojo lowered her head to meet the girl's eyes. She wasn't human anymore. She had started to rot from the moment she had used feelings as an excuse to hurt him to satisfy her vanity. This had nothing to do with her age. She was selfish. Bojo didn't say a word. She lifted her up and smiled. I'm different from the Almighty, I can hit women. Bang! There was another loud bang. Bojo pushed her away, running towards the direction where Kwang had disappeared without turning back. But it was too late. She glanced over. There wasn't a single person around. Kwang had disappeared. The student's hypnosis was still there. That was the most dangerous part. Chapter 1234. Bojo wore her Bluetooth earpiece and took out the equipment she had prepared. Her first reaction was to lock onto Li Jin's location. There was no response. He was still at home. There was no response from the listening device she had secretly installed on his computer. Did that mean Kwang hadn't contacted him? Could it be that her reasoning was wrong? Bojo shut her eyes. The only thing left in her mind was the calendar she had seen at Li Jin's house. That circle of red. No, her deduction wasn't wrong. There had to be something she hadn't noticed. What exactly was it? Bojo tightened her grip on her phone. Her identity had been exposed and there was no point in hiding anymore. A glint flashed past her eyes as she clicked on the group information. The teacher came over, asking which class she was from and why she wasn't at night revision at this hour. Bojo held onto the railing with one hand and leaped over the field. She jumped down from the 1-meter-high stance, her uniform fluttering in the wind. The teacher, Bojo didn't turn back, using her fastest speed to enter the classroom. At this moment, everyone received Li Jin's message. After finding out that the transfer student had been chosen as the new clown, some were shocked, some frowned, some didn't want to participate and some were excited. Regardless of their emotions, they had to follow the rules. Some of the more straightforward students were the happiest since the youngster was cold and handsome. They were happy to have a chance to embarrass him. It was a good chance for the youngster to know their school's tradition. Everyone was thinking of ways to prank Bojo. Now that the youngster had entered, they glanced at each other. One of them stretched out his leg without a change in expression, wanting to kick Bojo. However, to everyone's surprise, the young man lifted his leg and kicked the stool, sending the person who had stretched out his leg flying back together with the stool. There was a loud bang. Everyone's eyes widened in astonishment. One of the girls who had tried to splash water on Bojo was pinned onto the table. In an instant, the classroom was empty. Everyone watched the scene unfold before them. The youngster's black hair was wet, dripping down her chin. At this moment, the youngster grabbed onto the wrist of the person who had tried to sneak an attack with the baseball bat. Then she exerted strength with her long legs. The person flew out with a bang. The baseball bat landed in the youngster's hand. Bojo didn't restrain herself. With a loud swoosh, she raised the baseball bat and pointed it at everyone who was looking at her. She asked nonchalantly, "Who else wants to play?" No one dared to move. Even though the 5 of them had been hypnotized in the past, none of them dared to rush over. One of them had already been crippled. The other 4 were unsure of the identity of the young man in front of them. Why was he so good at fighting? After all, according to the information they had obtained, this person was quite ordinary. "You're not fighting anymore." Bojo held the baseball bat, a smile on her face. "I don't like fighting." The three who were beaten to the ground were speechless. Since you're done fighting, let's have a chat. Bojo stood on the podium since it was safer to have a wall behind her. I heard you have a king here. No one spoke. Bojo twirled the baseball bat. Are you happy to be bullied, manipulated, or even controlled? Then you guys are really stupid. When you guys enter society in the future, MLM organizations will probably like you a lot. After all, every scam is accurate. What did you say? Some of the girls couldn't stand it. They retorted with a flushed face. Who do you think you are? Bojo replied slowly, I'm no one. I'm not your parent or teacher. I don't have the responsibility to teach you how to be a person. That's good, I can beat you up whenever I want. MMH, that's great. The girl was speechless for a long time after hearing his words. Someone stood up. It was the class monitor. You're a guy and you dare to bully a girl. Bojo laughed lightly. To me, scum doesn't matter if they're male or female. If you don't like our class, you can leave. The class monitor pushed his spectacles. He laughed coldly. Bojo glanced up at the clock hanging on the wall. You'll probably be the first to leave. What do you mean? Before the squad leader could finish his sentence, the door at the back of the classroom was kicked open. The people who came in were all special forces with their faces covered. When the squad leader saw this, he raised his hand and wanted to grab someone as a hostage. However, the special forces wouldn't give him the chance. It was the same for the other four. Bojo pointed out all of them. Take them away. That's right, Bojo's actions were to stall for time and divert the attention of the five of them so that they couldn't do anything else. At the same time, Li Jin and Lu Jianing were also arrested. The rest weren't easy to deal with. Even though they knew that there was a case of campus violence, they couldn't do anything about it. Without the victim standing up to speak, it was hard to say anything about this kind of civil matter. Before the students could react, it was over. Before the students could react, it was already over. Your king will disappear. Bojo didn't leave. She remained at the podium, leaning on the baseball bat, her eyes glistening. Let me ask you again, do you really like to be used by others? A girl at the back clenched her fists. What right do you have to say that king is using us? Because everything you do is harmful to others. Would a good person allow you to do such things? Bojo glanced up, her gaze deep. Everyone is selfish, it's in their nature, but don't be so foolish. You are a student, don't you know what a student should do? Study more, at least you can grow some brains. Your parents are paying for you to study, are they for you to show off or to bully others? Do you know what your parents are worried about? They are worried that you won't have enough money to spend, that you won't have face in front of your classmates, and that you will be bullied. It doesn't matter if your conscience has been fed to a dog for that little bit of attention. You even think that you're especially smart. If you're smarter, you should study hard and make yourself more outstanding. You should make more sincere friends in school and play games with your parents when you're bored. There are so many entertainment options out there, but you just have to gather together to create flatulence. Didn't your king tell you that only sneaky rats act like this? Why you? The girl's shoulders trembled. Bojo remained calm, interrupting her. You can't win me in an argument. Chapter 12:35. When the students heard the youngster's last sentence, they couldn't help but want to laugh. You can't beat me in an argument. There was no one else. Ha ha ha. A round-faced girl laughed out loud, her laughter getting louder and louder. In the end, she stopped laughing and stood up. I don't want to, but I have no choice. Every time I see someone being bullied, I want to stop it, but do you know what the consequences are? I will be the one being ostracized and I'm afraid. I believe anyone would be afraid since we aren't as strong as you. The girl thought that the youngster would retort back. Unexpectedly, the youngster laughed. Don't forget, you're all in the same class. In my memory, school is like this. No one is allowed to bully the people in our class. If you dare to cross class to cause trouble, I don't care which year you are from or if you're older than me, you have to kneel before me. If I can't beat you, I still have the power of the whole class behind me. We're not together to bully anyone, but to tell everyone that you can't bully us like this. We have to be friendly with each other, boys protect girls. When it's time for a boy to stand up, a boy shouldn't be a coward. What would it look like for the whole class to bully one person? Who knows, if you stand up and help someone, someone might fall in love with you. Oh right, don't you students like the plot of the hero saving the damsel in distress? If you use it in real life, you can even get rid of the title of bachelor earlier. What do you mean by students? You don't sound like a student. A boy caressed his nose before asking, is it really useful? Bojo replied leisurely, you can ask the girl beside you who is blushing. If you really don't understand, you can read more romance novels to understand a young lady's heart. Of course, a young lady's heart is usually based on looks. With that, the students couldn't help but burst into laughter once more. A few Special Forces soldiers stood outside the door, glancing at each other. In the end, their gazes landed on the silhouette in a suit. Captain, that guy, psychological counseling. We're investigating psychological cases. It's obvious that these students are more or less sick. There might be some hopeless people in this class, but at the same time, there are some people who don't want to be like that. Haven't you noticed that the atmosphere in the classroom is much better than before? The figure walked over with a smirk on his face. It's really rare. I didn't expect to see the cold-blooded and heartless C giving psychological counseling to a bunch of students. Based on her personality in the past, she would probably only do it and not say anything. Chin Mo's existence really softened her. Special Forces, that guy had crippled 3 people and was still teaching students how to fall in love. Captain, are you sure this is gentleness? Wasn't he just creating trouble for the school? He face-bombed. Perhaps, only the figure could understand Bojo's intentions. A conversation could temporarily resolve the crisis that had erupted. In psychology, this was known as the golden time for treatment. Communication happened at the moment. Of course, there would still be such people among the students. The kind of people who clearly knew that their actions were hurting others, but they didn't feel anything. One could tell from their expressions. The reason Kwang could leave so easily was probably because the time was ripe. With just a small catalyst, something would germinate in his heart and he would use the hypnosis to kidnap the hostages. They had to find out the source of the catalyst. If they couldn't solve this problem, everything they had done before would be in vain. There were so many students in the school. Even if only 1 out of 10 of them was hypnotized, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, more than 70% of the students had already changed. The figure was right, that was indeed Kwang's plan. However, he hadn't expected his identity to be recognized by a high school student. If someone hadn't rushed over in time, he would have fallen into the other party's hands. Kwang, who was already in the jeep, narrowed his eyes. His fingers slid across the screen again, the pain from his leg making him smile. He seemed to be enjoying the feeling. If you had died in that school, Chin Mo wouldn't be in this state. It's such a pity that such a smart person would be buried with him. Kwang wasn't aware that Li Jin had been arrested. But in his eyes, it didn't matter even if all the chess pieces were arrested. After all, the key to the hypnosis wasn't in their hands. What was meant to happen would happen. No one would be able to detect it and no one would be able to stop it. Unless Chin Mo went over. But it was too late. He loved this feeling. The sky had turned completely dark. It was just past midnight, a few hours away from dawn. Kwang leaned back, his refined face tainted by the darkness of the night. In the interrogation room. The headlights were blinding. Li Jin glanced at the youngster sitting opposite him, his gaze wavering. How did you do it? Bo Jiu arched a brow. What? It's impossible that you didn't touch my things in my house. How did you restore it to its original state? Li Jin's face was pale and malnourished. No, I should be asking why my mother allowed you in and kept you for so long. How did you do it? Bo Jiu placed the documents down. At this stage, Li Jin was more concerned about the questions. Kwang was indeed good at picking people and the other party was smart. It's simple. With an outsider around, your stepfather wouldn't lay a hand on your mother. Bo Jiu's words caused Li Jin's expression to change. He tightened his grip on the cup. The people outside the interrogation room were surprised. After all, they had been interrogating Li Jin for 7 hours. They had asked and answered all the questions. Li Jin's emotions hadn't changed from the beginning to the end, saying that he didn't know or wasn't clear no matter what they asked. The scariest thing in an interrogation was this type of criminal. They wouldn't be able to get anything valuable out of him. But he was still young. How could such a young person cause them to feel suffocated? They were at their wits' end. They hadn't expected the youngster to change his expression with just 2 sentences. This was a good thing in an interrogation. At the very least, resistance was a form of leaking information. Chapter 1236. Hearing this, the people in the police station looked at each other. It was obvious that this wasn't a fair exchange. But even so, they couldn't reject him directly. Because in the hands of the other party, there was information related to the safety of the entire school. This wasn't just a small city, even if it was in the entire country, it would be a huge matter. If anything were to happen, none of them would be able to bear the responsibility. Under such circumstances, they could only call for an emergency meeting. The detectives have found some evidence. Li Jin might have some crucial information in his hands. No one knows what will happen if we don't agree to him. If the incident from 3 years ago happens again, the consequences will be unimaginable. But if we agree to his request, we might be releasing a tiger back into the mountains. Can we get someone to follow him? The investigation team has thought of this, but Li Jin is a little sinister. I'm afraid he's up to something. His request to let him off isn't as simple as it seems. He's a smart kid, he's asking us to send him out on camera. That's the only way he'll tell us what the hypnosis Kwang left behind is through text messages. Which means we can't be sure if he will send us the message after he leaves. Yes. The officer in the middle massaged his temples. Let's raise our hands to decide. Let's see if more people agree or disagree. No one moved, no one wanted to make the decision since it wasn't right. Time trickled by. Compared to when he was first brought in, Li Jin had a bigger smile on his face. That kind of smile hanging on his bloodless face would always make people feel uncomfortable from the bottom of their hearts. The more he behaved, the more worried they became. They weren't sure how many students like Li Jin were in the school. They couldn't find out, there were too many. Or perhaps, some people might look like that on the surface, but deep down, they were different. For the first time, they felt helpless. It was an indescribable feeling. A police officer leaned against the wall, probably too tired. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, asking the person beside him, "What do you think happened to the kids these days? Perhaps the environment is different. Go get something to eat, it's going to be dawn in less than 2 hours, I'll watch over them." The police had sent a lot of people to keep an eye on the school, just to prevent any unexpected incidents from happening. Li Jin didn't think much of it and even laughed. Teacher said that when you're handling a case, you like to take precautions. It's useless, no matter what you do, you won't be able to win against teacher. If you don't want to see mass suicides, it's better to follow my instructions. Let me go, I'll give you the information you want. Li Jin's voice could be heard in the meeting room. Everyone's expression changed, thinking anxiously about what they should do. More importantly, they didn't know who had released the news online. They said that they were thinking of ways to rescue a group of students with psychological problems, and for that, they were willing to release the criminals. Soon, the netizens started leaving comments. After seeing what happened to this school, I really can't believe there's such a school. Are the students here normal? This kind of student will harm others if he comes out. To save this kind of person, we have to release criminals. This is not right in itself. It's good that they are gone, I don't understand. That's right, such people should go to hell. The comments online intensified, many of them furious. The special investigation team was already in a terrible predicament and now they had to deal with such things. It was obvious how much pressure they were under. The person in the middle finally made a decision. Inform the subordinates, before he could finish his sentence, a voice rang out in the interrogation room. Suddenly, a voice rang out in the interrogation room, the voice neither loud nor soft, carrying the unique quality of a youngster. Li Jin, let's stop here. You have no idea what kind of hypnosis Kwang has planted in you. This is. The people in the meeting room started to stir. One of them, who hadn't spoken since the start, stood up. Why don't you listen? Someone wanted to stop them, but when he saw the person's face, he swallowed his words. Why was the young master of the Tang family here? In the interrogation room, Li Jin hadn't expected someone to say something like that. He clenched his fists under the table. Why didn't I know? I'm the person the teacher trusts the most here. He left everything to me, even allowing me to use the spies he planted in the class. If you don't want to let him go, just say it. I don't care if I can't get out or not. Li Jin, there's a limit to lying to yourself. Bo Jiu walked over, her eyes glistening. I went to your room again just now. You don't seem to know much about hypnosis. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such a basic book on it. You and I both know that if the teacher you mentioned cared a little, he wouldn't have left so easily. In his eyes, you are indeed more useful than others since you are intelligent. But regardless of whether a chess piece is useful or not, she is still his wife. For someone like Kwang, he would keep all his secrets to himself. Why would he allow a chess piece to know everything? I'm afraid the only thing you know is that something is going to happen today. Other than that, you don't know anything else. Since you understand your teacher so well, do you know where he is from, what he has been through and what kind of business he does? Li Jin chuckled, his expression starting to look forced. Why should I tell you? Chapter 1237. After hearing Bo Jiu's words, the entire conference room became extremely quiet. They wanted to move. But they were interrupted by Li Jin's laughter. It was an abnormal laughter. He pressed both hands on the table, the green in his eyes glaring. You're right, I want them to be afraid. What's the point of them living? What do you know? They destroyed everything I had, don't they deserve to die? I just want to study properly. What have they done? They laugh at me all day long. Don't they think I'm easy to bully? Then they should all go to hell. And you, speaking of which, you should be the same as me. Don't deny it, your scheming is no less than anyone else's. I don't see any intention of saving those people, do I? I heard from Lu Jianing that you almost kicked her to death. It seems like we're the same, those people aren't worth saving. Why do you have to hide your true feelings? The meeting room was in an uproar. Someone was about to stand up. Indeed, there are some people who aren't worth saving. For instance, Lu Jianing, her life has nothing to do with me. But there are many people in school who remain silent because they don't know how to handle such a situation. They want to help you but they aren't strong enough. You have to allow people to protect themselves, that isn't wrong. We are the same in nature but we have different principles. I won't let so many innocent people die just because I want to kill a few pieces of trash. Li Jin looked at the youngster in front of him, slowly returning to his seat, his voice fading. No one has thought of helping me, even my mom would suppress the matter of me being bullied in order to please her current husband. Young masters with parents like you, how would you understand how people like us feel? I attended secondary school overseas, Bo Jiao said calmly. Back then, foreigners were very anti-Chinese. Besides, I didn't have parents so many people came looking for trouble. In China, you were at least as tall as them and wouldn't be at a disadvantage in a fight. I was the same as you, I didn't have any friends back then and I didn't have any classmates to stand up for me since I was the only one with black eyes and black hair. But so what? Are you going to soften and call someone daddy just because you're beaten black and blue? Or are you so scared that you become a coward when you see someone stronger than you that you don't even dare to protect your mother? It was very simple to deal with people who ostracized you. If they didn't want to talk to you, then don't talk to them either. Communication was so advanced, who did they think they were? If you're not in the same circle, there's no need to force yourself to fit into the same circle. Bowing and scraping will only make people look down on you more and more. If no one cherishes you, don't tell me you don't cherish yourself. How old were they? Did they still think that life was a fairy tale? The rule of survival is simple. Here. Bo Jiao reached her hand out, tapping his spine. You have to stay straight no matter what. Li Jin couldn't describe the feeling. Chapter 1238. Li Jin's words were too late. Everyone's hearts sank. Bo Jiao was probably the calmest. That was because Li Jin was right, they were the same. Those who hadn't experienced those things wouldn't understand what it meant to be alone and helpless. When injustice was done to us, they would always think that the law was too far away and the fist was too close. It wasn't that they hadn't thought of resistance. But the resistance would be drowned out by other voices. Those who committed crimes shared the same traits, they were vain and would distort the truth. This had nothing to do with age and wasn't a dark side, they were just like that. Those who clamor that I am but what I have done are merely exculpating themselves of guilt. When they met such shameless people, it was important to know how to react. That was the most important thing to do when they met such shameless people. Similarly, they shouldn't be filled with hatred. You could try to become stronger or even look at yourself in the mirror to see if there was anything you needed to improve, be it your personality, the way you spoke or sometimes, your heart was just too weak. When you met with difficulties, you couldn't blame it on the circumstances. The kind of life you wanted to live depended on whether you were working hard. Bo Jiao knew that even now, there would still be people in that school who didn't think much of what they had done. But at the same time, Bo Jiao knew other than them, there were many others who didn't know what they were doing. For a long time, she wasn't sure what she was doing, she had even forgotten what her father had said. She thought there would always be someone in this world who would pull you up when you fell into the endless darkness. If no one was willing to be that person, what would happen in the future? Bo Jiao was a person who wandered in the darkness, just a figure. When he gradually became clear, you would understand that there were things you had to do. Even if there was a 0.1% chance that this kindness would be repaid to that person. I never believed that the world was bright, but I believe that I can create light. These were the last words she left Li Jin. Everyone is the same. As they walked out of the interrogation room, every minute became more and more pressing. There wasn't any valuable information from Li Jin. The only news in the meeting room was the one Bojo had provided. The youngster believed that Kwang's hypnosis would be activated today, but there wasn't any evidence as to how it would be activated. What was even more unbelievable was that it was Li Jin's intuition. No one could understand why the young man would believe a criminal's intuition. Alright, even if we all believe it, what should we do next? Tell every parent to keep an eye on their children. Someone rubbed his temples. That's not realistic, there are too many students in the school and some of their parents aren't even in the city. Even if they are, we don't know how Kwang would activate them. If the news were to spread, it would only cause a greater impact. The more unsettled the students are, the more unstable their mental states would be. By then, the situation would only worsen, and who would be responsible for it? Bojo laughed, a hint of mockery in her voice. In the end, you're just afraid of taking responsibility. You. That person's expression changed. Let me. The person sitting in the middle said, I'll bear all the responsibility, as long as I can save them. But this isn't the time to agitate them. Child, you should know that announcing the news isn't a good idea. Indeed, it would only make the danger more uncontrollable. Bojo stood up. I'll look for more information. Up until now, this was the only way. The clock hung on the wall pointed to 6 a.m. On this day, no one slept. The examiners flipped through the information over and over again. There were even specialized people observing the students to see if there were any differences. Everything was normal. Even a psychiatrist couldn't tell the difference. From 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., all the students had finished their breakfast. The day students had also arrived at the school gate at this time. Of course, there were students who were late. But no matter how one looked at it, the school seemed to be thriving. How could anything have happened? Could he have made a mistake and it isn't today? In the camouflage nanny van, one of the officers nudged his colleague's arm, lowering his voice as he gestured for him to look at the youngster in the passenger seat. The youngster was holding onto an iPad, the images of Li Jin's interview and the occasional images of the school doctor. Kwang was meticulous and it was obvious. There weren't many images of him on the iPad, all of them from afar. Outside the car window, the sound of the students fighting could be heard through the wind. Indeed, there wasn't a single trace of abnormality. Was she thinking too much? Bojo shut her eyes. She wasn't sure if it was because she had stayed up late for the past 2 days, but her nose was stuffy and her head was dizzy. She was slightly tired. Her thoughts were heavy. Faintly, she dreamt of the time when she was at home. He had tilted his head and explained physics to her. You can apply the formula to any question as long as you use it flexibly. In that case, she replied lazily. After all, she wasn't interested in physics, she was only interested in people. There are so many questions, I'm getting dizzy. He held the side of his face and slapped her forehead. No matter how complicated the description of the question is, you just need to remember one thing. Figure out the real intention of the person who came up with the question. The rest of the description is just a smokescreen, idiot. Beep, beep, beep. The ear-piercing sound of a car engine could be heard. All of a sudden, Bojo opened her eyes. We seem to be blocking someone's car. It's 8:10 p.m., the students should be in by now, let's move the car. Bojo listened to the noise, her head still heavy and her breathing became difficult. She tilted her head up and drank a mouthful of mineral water. That was when she remembered that her body wasn't healthy. Fortunately, she could handle it. The water flowed down her throat, making her feel better. Bojo glanced out of the car window. The bustling school entrance was now empty and the guards were closing the doors. She wasn't sure if it was the influence of the dream. Bojo tapped on Lee Jin's recording again, the sentence still lingering in her mind. Understand the intention of the person who came up with the question. Suddenly, Bojo paused on the mass suicide that Lee Jin had mentioned. No, that wasn't right. That wasn't Kwang's true intention. Kwang wanted hostages to rush towards him so that he could be safe. Mass. Chapter 1239. Swoosh. Bojo reached out to pull the car door open and jumped out. She only said, "Follow me." Her sudden action caused the driver to break out in cold sweat. He was just about to board the train. The people at the back glanced at each other before pulling the car door open. They gritted their teeth as they ran. The conference room was connected to the commotion. When someone heard the commotion, he straightened. "What's wrong?" "We don't know either," that youngster suddenly jumped out of the car. The guard didn't understand what Bojo was thinking. At this moment, the railing at the school gate was lowered. Bojo didn't hesitate. She held onto the railing with one hand and leaped over. She was still wearing her school uniform. As soon as the guard's voice rang out, he saw two people behind the young man leaping in as well. The key point was that they raised their IDs. The guard was stunned. What was going on? There was a broadcast in the school. The general content was for the students to take their stools and take their seats according to the formation of each class. The sound got softer and softer. It seemed like it had been arranged. Bojo's speed doubled once more. Because of the word large scale. Even though the hypnosis could be activated at any time. But if it was large scale, the entire school would be watching the movie today. What Kwang wanted wasn't to trigger the hypnosis individually. If that was the case, any time would be fine. Once the hostages were gone, they would lose their value. In a large-scale riot and stampede, even if there were guards around, they wouldn't be able to stop a portion of the students from jumping into the car and leaving after receiving the hypnosis. Their actions would be large-scale. If everyone ran in the same direction, even if they were running towards the criminals, they wouldn't be able to open fire. That was Kwang's motive. He wanted everyone to know that they would be holding this batch of hostages outside the border. This way, once everyone knew about it, regardless of who was going to take action, they would have to rescue these hostages because they were still children. And the only way to stop all of this was to cut off the broadcast. Bojo ran towards the sound. At this moment, the sound of the movie entering could be heard. In the distance, the projection teacher watched in confusion as a student ran over. He frowned, thinking that it was someone from another class who was late. Bojo glanced over. No matter how fast she was, it would take at least a minute to reach the broadcast location. It was too late. If he ran over, it would indeed be too late. Moreover, the teachers in charge of maintaining order were already walking towards her. Because of this, people didn't even notice the frequent small movements of the students when they saw the scenes and sounds played in the movie. Those actions were really normal, and there was nothing bad about the movie. But everything reminded her of the most famous hypnosis case. In the beginning, when the audience listened to the drumming, they only felt that their emotions were higher than usual, and they would make some small movements from time to time. However, as time went on, they became more and more uncontrollable, to the point that no one knew why these people became restless in the end and wanted to escape from the scene, resulting in a sudden large-scale stampede. Chapter 1240. This student, the physical education teacher, walked over with his hands on his waist. He probably wanted her to return to her seat. In a crowded place, the airflow wouldn't be high. No one expected Bojo to stop. She raised her hand to put on her mask. Then she glanced up, the military dagger in her hand unsheathing with a swoosh. It flew straight towards a tree next to the screen. That was the main switch that controlled all the electricity. The volume of the video was very loud. Other than a portion of the teachers, no other students noticed this scene. The only thing they could feel was, after the sound of paw. The screen turned black and the sound stopped. Their thoughts seemed to have been pulled back from somewhere. All the students blinked, then turned their heads to talk to the people next to them. What's going on? Is there a power outage? I'm not sure, could it be a power outage? In that instant, the field was in an uproar. Some of the students stood up to check on the situation, some lowered their heads to play games, some turned back to ask for snacks from their roommates. Even though the discipline wasn't that strict, fortunately, nothing terrible had happened. They remained in their original positions. Some of them might have been confused about why they had been so angry a moment ago, but now that the feeling had disappeared, they rubbed their chests in confusion. On the other side, the physical education teacher was about to break down. He shouted loudly, "You little brat! Do you know what you have done, Aishi?" It wasn't easy for him to be in charge of the school's video broadcast. He had made such a huge mistake. His internship period was going to be extended. Seriously. The physical education teacher raised his arms, grabbing his hair in anger. Bojo laughed. This kind of teacher was undoubtedly cute in her eyes. In reality, regardless of the occupation, there would be good and bad people. Some people in the education system would do anything to earn money. But similarly, there were some people who became teachers because they hoped to become good teachers. Hence, they often thought about how to interact with the children of this era and how to help them develop in a better direction. The Almighty was right. Everyone's eyes were the same. It depended on what you were looking for. But cutting off the electricity in public was a challenge to the school's authority. The Dean of Academic Affairs walked over and was about to speak. The two plainclothes officers rushed over, one hand on their knees while the other raised their identification documents, panting heavily. This is our colleague." The dean's eyes widened. This kid was obviously wearing their school uniform and she was so young. How could she be from the police? There's something wrong with the video. How many of these videos are there in the school? Destroy all of them and ban them from being shown in the future. I'll bring the sample back. From a certain perspective, Bojo wasn't willing to be associated with the police. What a joke, she was in the underworld, why would she be friendly with her natural enemy? There's something wrong with the film. The teacher in charge of the screening was dumbfounded. What problem could there be with the movie? It was all normal. There was nothing like 18K. How could there be a problem? The two guards were also a little embarrassed. After all, there was nothing wrong with the contents of the films. Chapter 1241. The guard tugged Bojo's sleeves. Are you sure it's a problem with the film? I'm sure. Bojo's tone was calm. Disperse the students and get them to return to their classrooms. Also, get someone to get a psychiatrist to do a test. The guard didn't say anything else since his superiors had instructed him to listen to the youngster. Even though they didn't know where he had come from, this was the best they could do given the current situation. The school would be able to cooperate with them if they explained. Actually, the students had their own thoughts. It wasn't as if they hadn't seen the news online. It was just a different reaction. Some of them felt that Lee Jean was a toad. They were giving him face by teaching him a lesson. What was he going to do to them? Some of them were scared to death since some of them wanted to join in the fun. They wanted to be more friendly in the future. Some of them wore their headphones and closed their eyes. They told themselves that they wouldn't bully anyone in the future and that they would be the one to stand out when they could. It was just that no one knew that the danger had already been resolved without them even knowing. The film was brought to the meeting room. Bojo and the other 3 famous psychologists were present. In the end, they came to a unanimous conclusion. The film was indeed fine. If the target group was the students, then there would be a huge problem. After all, they already had the previous setting. Bullying and being bullied. Ostracization, vanity, attention. That's all they wanted. That was the problem. Firstly, there was an image that stimulated one's perception. It was very simple. Everyone would have a different view of this matter when they looked at it. Based on your personality, you would be able to relate to it. They played the video for Lu Jianing to watch. In less than 3 minutes, she became very violent. After all, they were born to compare and wanted to get attention. If you provoked them, they would have a very strong backlash. That wasn't all. The sound of the film seemed normal, but if you listened to it separately, you would realize that the sound effects were extremely rushed. It was easy to trigger people's emotions. If it hadn't been interrupted in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. They came to a conclusion. The 3 psychologists were also shocked. Everyone who studied criminal psychology would know about the case from abroad. However, such cases were not common. How could that child be so young? How did he know? Just as the 3 psychologists were about to question someone, they realized that the youngster was no longer in the conference room. The safety of the students was finally secured. After the hypnosis was removed, the local psychological agency would find some students to talk to. Those who had been violent and humiliating others but still felt that they had done nothing wrong would go through the legal process and be sent to the juvenile detention center. Some people said that it was too strict. Anyway, the matter had passed. They were just some children. What did they know? First of all, those who are over 10 years old and do not have a sense of right and wrong should not call themselves children. At the very least, the 5-year-old babies would express their dissatisfaction. Furthermore, no matter how small it was not an excuse for them to feel that it was okay to hurt someone. Moreover, this wasn't simply being ignorant. They were enjoying forming a gang to seize, possess, and bully others. It was time for these people to receive their just deserts. No one was born a murderer. It was just that he didn't care this time, and he didn't care next time. Over time, some things would become more and more unscrupulous. Those who said that the matter was over were probably kind-hearted and had good intentions. But sometimes, ignorant kindness would only help the murderer to form. It wasn't a big deal to teach them a lesson when they made a mistake. When they thought about the people they had bullied, everything would be fair. But for such a huge case to be solved, someone had to make a big contribution. Who would have thought that the youngster would disappear that afternoon? At this moment, Bojo was hunching her back. She pulled off her jacket and threw away her school uniform. She changed into a black suit. Her figure was so straight that it was impossible to tell how she looked like before. She faced the car window and twisted the tie on her shirt. Her hair fell down, completely displaying the advantage of her face. Bojo was dressed this way because she had received a voice message from young Master Qin. I have good news for you, treat it as a reward for your work. The informant in the MT region sent news. Actually, even if you hadn't appeared, Kuang would have gone back yesterday because he had to meet a very rich Chinese man. I heard that the Chinese man is very extravagant. The moment he arrived in Country T, he bought a huge cruise ship and a huge batch of firearms to protect himself. He wanted to buy good goods locally. Of course, the Chinese man's identity isn't clear. What we know is that he's a rich second-generation heir with a powerful family background. He also has a very capable investment consultant by his side. So here's the question, who do you think he is? Was there a need to guess? Such a nouveau riche, it couldn't be anyone else other than Prince. As for the extremely capable investment consultant, it should be the Almighty. After all, the Almighty's abstinence didn't seem out of place at all. Bojio raised her hand to buckle the sensor watch. Her eyes seemed to be glowing as she entered the Lamborghini. She closed the door casually and entered a few words on the navigation system. A voice notification floated over. The specific address has been confirmed. The entire journey is 800 miles and there is sufficient fuel. Let's go. Bojio turned the steering wheel with one hand and did a beautiful drift. At this moment, she didn't look like the student she had been before. She was a rich playboy, but because of her suit, she carried a hint of business aura. Master, your heartbeat is too fast. Are you so happy because there's news of the Demon King? Bojio nodded. Master, your heartbeat is too fast. Is there news of the Demon King? Little Blackie, I realized that even though most of the time your intelligence isn't enough, you're pretty smart this time. Bojio increased the speed of the car, unable to suppress the smile on her face. Not bad. Little Blackie. It didn't feel like it was being complimented. It felt as though it was being forced to swallow a bowl of dog food. Life wasn't going to be easy. If they really met the devil, they wouldn't be receiving, and kissing in the car, would they? The moment little Blackie imagined the scene, the headlights started to flicker. Chapter 1242. In the cruise ship. The sudden ringing of the phone. This caused the few people who were training to stop their movements one after another. Chi Nemo glanced at the boss on the surface. Answer it. Prince glanced at the caller ID, waiting for the people beside him to put on their earphones before answering. Hello. Hello. It was Scorpion's number, but at this moment, the voice changed. I heard that you are interested in doing business with me. Prince maintained his carefree persona. Who are you? Kawang. The moment the two words came out, Prince stiffened. Prince froze, his expression changing in an instant. Why? Don't you know me? Kawang seemed to be guessing his thoughts all the time. That was the reason he gave off such an oppressive aura. Prince listened to the voice beside his ear. Unknowingly, he felt a chill at the back of his neck. If his boss hadn't been sitting in front of him, tapping the table, he probably wouldn't have known how to reply. Of course I know you. Prince smiled. I've heard many legends about this title in the MT region. However, I'm most interested in how many good items you have. Kawang didn't come to a conclusion. He glanced down at the crippled person and took the handkerchief from the person beside him. He wiped the blood off his fingers, not saying a word. Instead, he turned around and shook his finger. Only an "ah" sound could be heard. The scream of pain shocked not only Prince, but also Magician and the others. Their fingers froze. Chi Nemo was the only one who didn't move. He just sat there, his face elegant, as though he wouldn't be surprised no matter what he heard. At this moment, Kawang chuckled. I'm really sorry, I just settled some internal matters and caused a commotion. I had no choice, there are always people trying to sneak in. This time, it was the special forces from China. They thought I wouldn't be able to find them, it's really, Kawang didn't finish his sentence. But through that painful scream, Prince could imagine what it was like on the other side. He couldn't control himself, clenching his fists. Magician gritted his teeth as well. Everyone was furious, including Wolf, who had always been indifferent. Prince couldn't take it anymore. He tilted his head, his breathing rising. Qin Mo was one step ahead of him, reaching out to block the microphone. The deepness in his eyes was like a calming stone, allowing Prince to adjust himself. Then, he smiled. Is he really a fool? They've always been like this. I caught a few of them and threw them into the high seas to feed the fish. Kowang's voice was gentle. I didn't expect us to have the same thoughts in this aspect. But my way of handling things is slightly different from yours. I won't feed them to the sea. The injured ones will be more useful as hostages. Do you think the Huaxia Special Forces will think of a way to save their comrades? Prince's fingers tightened, but he had to maintain the image of a nouveau riche. Who cares if they come to save us? That's your concern. I only care if I can earn money. Chapter 1243. I will send the address to Your Excellency's mobile phone later, and someone will bring Your Excellency here to inspect the goods. Remember to prepare the first deposit, Your Excellency. With that, Kowang hung up the phone. He was still wearing his white coat as he glanced at the computer screen and the subsequent reports. What he had planned hadn't happened. The important chess piece that should have called him at this time seemed to have gone missing. The large-scale trampling incident he had wanted to see was like a mist, it hadn't even appeared. What did this mean? Kowang knew it clearly. This meant that none of the hostages he had found would appear. The students hadn't come to the border. The off-road vehicle he had prepared had lost its purpose. At the start, Kowang had assumed that China was trying to calm the public, suppressing the news and not reporting it. But after he had received the news, he realized that someone had ruined his plans. Someone had ruined everything he had prepared for such a long time. Kowang's gaze gradually turned cold. His eyes were like a snake's, filled with a sinister aura. The sun in the MT region had always been bright. But no matter how bright the sun was, Scorpion could feel the anger emanating from the person in front of him. Bang! Kowang raised his gun, turning to shoot a bullet at one of the informants. Then he smiled. I never expected the person Qin Mo fancied to be so capable. But it doesn't matter, it's all thanks to him that we managed to obtain such useful information. With that, he hefted the communication device in his hand. Anyone who contacted the outside world would leave a record. He had purposely asked Fan Jia to lower her standards. He hadn't expected to catch a rat. He wasn't sure who the message was sent to. But he was very interested in the contents. After all, the Chinese businessman had been mentioned. It seemed like the other party was very concerned about his business. Didn't this mean that there was something wrong with this group of people? Kowang's heart sank. He ordered his men to capture the person who had spread the news for the Chinese businessman. With one look, he understood. Even though the person had denied colluding with anyone before his death, Kowang didn't believe him. Of course, he couldn't deny that the Chinese businessman was real. But if the other party was fake, Qin Mo might be inside. Kowang smiled, reaching out to wipe away the blood at the corner of his lips. If Qin Mo really existed, the exchange of information was extremely valuable. That's right, losing the student hostage was equivalent to losing half of the initiative. However, there was one thing that he had an absolute advantage over. He had already discovered the other party's identity, but the other party was still immersed in joy, thinking that everything was going smoothly. Kowang walked over to the table, looking at the image on the screen. Suddenly, he broke into a smile. Compared to those students, you are the most valuable hostage. It's a pity I didn't manage to kidnap you back, but when Qin Mo comes, any news about you would be enough to turn him into a different person. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for letting me discover you in school. Fan Jia didn't speak because she couldn't be more familiar with that image. She had been looking for this person for such a long time, but she did not expect that her master would be the first one to meet her. This was like a slap to her face. Go and make a video. Kwang's voice was calm, he seemed to have finally adjusted his emotions. Wearing his white coat, he walked towards the computer screen. Use this footage and make some changes to the content. It's time for Qin Mo to have a second taste of what it feels like to lose something. If the Chinese businessman is really him, your video will come in handy. He didn't need to explain it clearly, Fan Jia understood her master's intentions in the next second. Back then, she had pretended to be his childhood playmate to get close to him. She hadn't expected him to see through her in less than 10 days. But even so, they knew what his weakness was. They had to find that line of defense and destroy it completely, planting a psychological cue. Now, her master was probably going to reactivate that psychological cue. If that was the case, that person's personality would change drastically and he would become one of them. With that thought, Fan Jia couldn't suppress the smile on her face, her eyes glistening. I'll go and prepare now. On the cruise, after hanging up the phone, Prince kicked the chair in front of him away, his eyes filled with depression. Almost everyone present understood that feeling. Another comrade had been captured. He didn't even need to think to know what kind of cruel treatment he would receive from Kwang. It was impossible not to be furious. Right now, everyone was thinking about capturing that thug, Kwang, so that he wouldn't be able to do as he pleased in this world. There was only one person sitting on the chair, his long fingers tapping on the table as he listened to the recording of the phone call. After the third time, he removed his earphones, standing tall and handsome. Kwang is setting a trap for you, every sentence is a test. From another angle, there is a problem, he is suspecting our identity and you almost exposed yourself. Prince stilled, his eyes widening. He hadn't expected it to be so serious. He knew that Kwang was purposely provoking him, but he hadn't thought much about it. Now that he had heard Qin Mo's words, Prince felt sweat dripping down his forehead. Kwang was more unpredictable than they had imagined. If Kwang is really suspecting our identity, boss, are we still going for the deal? Magician felt uneasy. Qin Mo stood up. Don't forget what the mission is, it's normal for us to be suspected. Kwang is a suspicious person and no one would immediately believe a Chinese person who has just entered the industry. Report the situation to the higher-ups. Fatty, check which special forces unit the captured soldiers belong to and which tourists are the hostages. We'll see how we can save them. Yes. The few of them split up, getting to work. The moment China received Qin Mo's news, they called for a meeting immediately. The atmosphere was tense. Whether to take action or not was a difficult decision to make. There were too many times when a decision had to be made and it had to be made. If they hadn't received the news previously, they could have taken it as the Chinese tourists had all been massacred. But now, they received the news. Kwang still had 17 ordinary tourists in his hands. The relatives of these tourists were all hoping for their return. They couldn't ignore such hopes. But at the same time, even though they knew Kwang was suspicious of Qin Mo and the others, they still sent the children to carry out the mission. They couldn't bear to do it. They were the top special forces in China. Their average age wasn't even 25 years old. Everyone knew that this was a mission that they might not be able to return from. General Qin wasn't the only one in the meeting. It was too difficult for them to make a decision. Indeed, it was too difficult. But all the spies had fallen. Now, only this team was left. They were the closest to Kwang's lair. If they were fully prepared, they would be able to break the stalemate and lock onto Kwang's exact location. With the video evidence and the tourists still alive, they would be able to mobilize the foreign troops. But all of this required someone to go against Kwang. Otherwise, no one could be sure if the 17 tourists, including the spies that Kwang had captured, would still be alive. This was the situation everyone understood. At the same time, Bojiu received 2 voice messages from young Master Tang. At this moment, Bojiu was 500 kilometers away from the border. She drove the Lamborghini very fast, even exceeding the speed limit. Her eyes were unprecedentedly dark. Bojiu was clear that even without this meeting, that person would have made the decision to save them. It was because of the clothes he was wearing. More importantly, he had said that the soldiers of China were born to save people. Little Blackie. Bojiu turned and ordered, "Help me get Hoshino's call." "Yes, master." The navigation system changed and the internet connected automatically. The video wasn't a road map anymore. Instead, it was directed to a computer. The next moment, Hoshino's handsome face with a faint smile appeared in front of Bojiu's eyes. He seemed to have just finished training. He was in his esports uniform and there was a black earpiece on his ear. Bojiu was used to seeing him in a sweater. Now that he had changed, it gave her a faint glow. "It's rare that you would send me a video call directly. Hoshino, I need you to help me investigate a place." Bojiu tilted her head. Her eyes were bright. "Use the power of the entire hacker world." Hoshino paused. Then he smiled. "I understand. I'm the only one here. The access is limited. Now, connect to the regional network. Is it okay for me to log in with your account?" "It's okay." Bojiu was straightforward. Hoshino's gaze turned warm. When Yusishin pushed the door open, this was the scene he saw. He didn't need to think to know who he was talking to. But Hoshino actually gestured for him to leave. Yusishin tied up his long hair. His sharp handsomeness made him exude a sense of coldness. Then he slammed the door. He didn't even want the cake he had bought. His long legs stepped on the pure black battle axe. The manager behind Yusishin was a little cautious. "Young master, what's wrong? Isn't young master Hoshino around?" "Why isn't he around?" "He's kissing his lover. He probably doesn't have time to care about you." "Why? Do you want to test my driving skills?" When Yusishin said this, the corners of his eyes turned cold. Such a man could really make people feel scared. The manager remembered the person who wanted to touch young master's car. He broke one of his ribs. He hurriedly waved his hands. "No, no, no, I'm just asking." Who did he offend? He felt so wronged. Yusishin didn't say anything. He glanced at the cake box that he had thrown. The more he looked at it, the more irritating he felt. He stepped on the accelerator. He was arrogant like a ball of fire. He didn't know who he would burn. Only young Master Hoshino could make the prince of the underworld reveal his emotions. The manager sighed. He didn't dare to ask why. Upstairs, Hoshino had already opened his laptop. Basically, as long as he had the young lord's instructions, it would be very easy to investigate a place. But the place they wanted to investigate today wasn't so easy to find. Because it was in the MT area, the ungoverned area of the Golden Triangle, everything became very complicated. First of all, this place wasn't developed. In addition, it was surrounded by dense forests. This meant that the communication here wasn't developed. In a place where communication wasn't developed, the internet wasn't widespread. To a hacker, in order to infiltrate a place, they had to have a network first. That way, it would be easier for them to operate. But here, because the network signal was too weak. In order to infiltrate, they had to find a suitable route. A few simple hackers definitely wouldn't be able to do it. But Bojiu had said that they had to gather the power of the entire hacker world. This meant that this infiltration wasn't limited to one type of network. As long as there was a route, they would be able to infiltrate. But they still needed time, and it would take a long time. No one was sure if they would be able to find the place before their young lord arrived. Hoshino replied this question to Bojo. The next second, Bojo gave a solution. Try to start from the network operator. Starting from the network operator meant that as long as there was a signal, regardless of whether it was the main flow network or not, it would be detected. Many people said that hackers relied on their coding ability and hacking skills. That was indeed true. But there was another point that people often neglected. That was the thought process to infiltrate. A correct thought process to infiltrate could save a lot of time. And to a hacker, time was the deciding factor. With Bojo's thought process, hackers from all over the world quickly integrated the information and deleted it. In the end, it landed on a region. This region was west of the Mekong River. It was the largest natural forest. The last piece of information regarding Kawang had come from this place. Chapter 1244. Unless someone can destroy the signal interference equipment, Bojo interrupted Hoshino. She turned the steering wheel with one hand, her eyes as dark as the night sky. Hoshino, thank you. When he heard the last few words, Hoshino knew Bojo's decision. Similarly, he knew that as an assistant, he had to prepare everything. I will get someone to prepare the equipment for you before you enter the forest. But that place has always been heavily guarded. Our spies won't stay there for long. You will have to go to the designated location to get it. As Hoshino spoke, he had already entered the regional network. The hacker aristocrat clan sounded simple. But in reality, when you got to know them, you would realize that they never lacked manpower. This was arranged by the old steward. As long as there were people, there would be a supply point. This was the rule of the underworld. Any organization would obtain the information they needed from the hacker aristocrat clan. Correspondingly, they had to provide a certain level of protection. Of course, they wouldn't care about life and death, but they would always be conservative when it came to equipment. This was an unspoken understanding. In the past, there had been people who felt that the hacker aristocrat clan was just impressive on the internet. They were probably useless in real life. They wanted to break the rules and not provide the equipment needed to end the hacker aristocrat clan. Such an organization disappeared in front of everyone's eyes in less than a week. The hacker aristocrat clan sold information, but that didn't mean that they were weak. Everyone knew what kind of person the young lord of the hacker aristocrat was. Unless they had no other choice, they would never offend C. After all, everyone helping each other out was what everyone in the underworld wanted to see. This was the same in the MT region. Just as Bojo drove towards the direction of the forest, the Supreme Council had made a decision and the operation continued. This was Chin Mo's suggestion. Because he knew very well what the current situation was. Perhaps every Special Forces soldier had been prepared for this from the very beginning. Regardless of what awaited them in front of them, they had to learn how to overcome it. If the mission was too dangerous, they wouldn't go for the rescue. That would probably go against the original intention of wearing this uniform. Chin Mo lifted his lids and looked at his soldier. None of them had any intention of not going. When they had heard that Kawang had Chinese compatriots, their first reaction had been to think of a way to save them. Chin Mo used a pen to draw an area on the map. According to the analysis of the information, Kawang would usually choose his old nest for a deal. The most important thing now is that no one knows the exact location of Kawang's old nest. Hence, we need to stall for time during the negotiation. The signal can't be detected. Fatty frowned. How are we going to retreat? Chapter 1245. He wanted him to show his fear towards the Devil King. Prince thought that it was too easy. However, he had never thought that he would have such an elder brother. Prince tried to put himself in the role of the little black boy. He felt that his boss might be strict, but at least he doted on his younger brother. Hence, he should be able to do whatever he wanted to. But reality proved that Prince was too naive. Just as he was about to give the devil a hug to show his brother's happiness, his boss glanced over. Boss glanced over with a cold gaze that made one's scalp numb. There's no need for physical contact. Prince glared. Then how are we going to show our brotherly love? I'll suppress you harshly. It's a sign of brotherhood, Chin Mo replied slowly. Prince, he had been living in his fantasy for one more minute. His boss wasn't like this when he was with the little black boy. He would bring him water or carry sweets in his pocket. He would smile and pat his head whenever they didn't agree. Why was he suppressing him harshly? Check your belongings. Chin Mo glanced over, his long fingers tapping on the table. According to Kwang's personality, he won't let us reach our destination directly. From the map, we have to take a boat first. Before that, we will have to alight from our own car and be blindfolded. Our belongings might be detected. Hence, we have to be careful and change all internal communication devices to watches. Wear a coat, especially the one Prince is wearing. Magician, from today onwards, you will have a habit. Magician was still in a daze. Chin Mo had already prepared a poker card for him. You play poker all the time. Magic should be easy for you. Magician glanced at the ace of hearts in his hand. He understood what his boss meant. Poker cards could be used as a hidden weapon. He couldn't bring a fully formed weapon. He could only bring something unexpected and defensive. Fatty, you will be in charge of tracking. Once we meet up with Kwang's men, you can't follow anymore. Remember to lock onto our location and maintain a 24-hour link with the troops. Yes. Chin Mo's words could be heard from the conference room. There were still 3 hours before the meeting time Kwang had said. They could only make sufficient preparations within a limited time. Kwang was already suspicious of them, and the moment they moved time, his suspicions would only increase. Therefore, this operation more or less depended on luck. In terms of disguise, there was no need to worry. Magician's makeup skills were on par with Bojio's. In less than half an hour, Chin Mo's face had undergone a drastic change. He didn't look like he used to. Instead, he looked more like young Master Chin. However, he looked more imposing. He had a short beard on his face and looked very manly. Coupled with the knife scar at the corner of his eye, he didn't look like young Master Chin anymore. In addition, Chin Mo's natural aura made Prince feel that his boss had entered the wrong profession. He seemed more like a big boss than a gangster. At the starting point, the hour hand pointed to 3. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.